One is if you don't want any questions that are off topic, like let me know. We can keep them constrained to the topic. I think they'll be on topic. And then I know that Jim Bob, you had mentioned you don't want the profane stuff. So if they're saying something like really lewd or gross,
Yeah, I
totally
mean,
understandable.
sure,
I will
yeah.
not read those.
Now, I'm cool with
And
insults and stuff. I don't really care. Well,
I'll see if they can come up with their most well, I suppose in respect for Jim Bob's audience not having to hear the lewd stuff. We'll save the most lewd stuff for you, Craig, next time. But yeah, basically, um, I will have to get up a little bit, like here and there. I am still paying attention. Even if I disappear from the green screen will lose me sometimes if I back up enough. What it is my back gets like super tight. So basically, it might be the case that I'm stretching like I'm because if I sit too long, it is really bad. But anyway, here I go in three, two, one. Thanks for being here, guys. Here I go. Three, two, one, ready, set, go. Hey, everybody. Today we're debating evolution on trial, and we are starting right now with Craig's opening statement. Thanks for being with us, Craig. The floor is all yours.
hey, glad to be back once again. Always fun. Um, so we're here to talk about evolution. You know that thing your immune system does every time a virus mutates. Not some nonsense about fish hooking up with a monkey at a nightclub, because that's not how this works. Evolution is just this wild concept where living things adapt over generations to better survive in their environment. Totally radical, right? Almost like it's just biology doing biology. We see it happening in real time, like in controlled lab experiments where bacteria literally evolve to survive in specific solutions. They don't sit down for a team meeting. Nature just filters out the losers. Or how about the London Underground mosquitoes? They evolved into a completely different breed just from chilling in the subway for a few decades. Turns out isolation and pressure make more than diamonds. They make brand new mosquitoes that can't even breed with their surface cousins anymore. That's speciation. And it's not hypothetical, it's literally happening within our lifetimes. If that's not enough, let's not forget about the mountains of fossil evidence. Not just a few bones lying around, entire chronological novels written in rock, showing clear transitions from species to species. Tic-Tac didn't just crawl out of the water to stretch its legs for fun. It was a snapshot of change. So no, evolution isn't a game of genetic spin the bottle between fish and monkeys. It's the observable, testable, relentless process that explains why you have wisdom teeth, a tailbone, and a cousin who thinks the Earth is 6,000 years old. Many times, people that I'm debating on evolution just spend the entire debate not understanding what evolution is. The fact is, evolution is a process that goes on constantly. It is happening now. We see it in real time. It has allowed us to be the people we are. It is simply adapting to environmental pressures. And that doesn't just mean having more babies makes a better species. That could mean a species having to reduce itself to less than 1,000 in its entire population to be able to survive the environmental pressures. Evolution is biology in progress. It is seeing biology adapt to the world that it lives in, and the people, the things that survive those pressures, those adaptations are the ones that carry on. That's why we're taller now than we used to be. That's why our brains are bigger now than they used to be. Apart from flat earthers, I guess. Evolution isn't just some crazy theory. It is a fact of the world we live in, and it is how we have come to be the biggest, most intelligent species on this planet. So the evidence for evolution, there's mountains of it. So if Jimbob has evidence that evolution doesn't happen, then I'll be glad to hear that. But I certainly hope that Jimbob doesn't just strawman what evolution actually is and argue against something he's made up, like every single person I've ever spoken to about evolution does. So yeah, thank you very much for having me on, James. Glad to hear what
Thank
Jimbob has to
you.
say.
Thank you. And before we kick it over to Made by Jim Bob, I want to give you a quick couple of housekeeping things. Folks, if you did not know, at the bottom right of your screen, Andrew Wilson will be taking on Apostate Prophet. That's on April 28th. That is at Asheville, North Carolina. You don't want to miss it. If you're nearby, grab tickets, which are linked in the description box below. There's an option for free tickets. So check out that link. And if you're like, hey, I would love to do that and come for a free ticket, but I can't make it. I'm in Australia or England or Washington. You can watch it live here at the Modern Day Debate YouTube channel. So hit that subscribe button. And with that, we'll kick it over to Made by Jimbob for his opening. Thanks very much. The floor is all yours, Jimbob.
All right, thank you very much. So I guess the question is, what is evolution? It's said to be the process by which different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from earlier forms during the history of the Earth. Now, I like to point out that it's often claimed that evolution inside of natural biology in the natural world, it's in the natural sciences, it's referred to as a scientific theory. My contention with evolution is that it's actually not a valid scientific theory, because for something to be a scientific theory, there's actually a pretty strict criteria to call something a valid scientific theory. So not only do I have contentions with evolution and its larger claims, which goes outside of the bounds of simply adaptation, their larger claims over time are unjustified. But even pinpointing the fact that
Hello? I'm still here, right?
I think we have a connection issue.
Oh, it's
So,
not me, though.
oh, there we go. I think
Okay.
we lost you at, I think you had said the word pinpointing.
Okay. Well,
So only
Okay.
about 5 to 10 seconds.
okay, great. That's fine. All right. So I was talking about the scientific theory. There needs to be a criteria for calling something a scientific theory inside of natural science. I said that evolution doesn't make its way through the scientific method. For those of you who are wondering what that is, it starts with an observation in reality. It starts with you then ask a question about what you're observing, and then the question leads to what's causing what you're observing. Then it leads to an experiment. Then you have to actually do the experiment. You have to manipulate things, and then you come to some conclusion. And only after the conclusion can you develop what's called a scientific theory, which is essentially an inductive conclusion to a high percent of likelihood until proven otherwise. Now, I'm saying that evolution doesn't even make its way through this. It doesn't even have a viable hypothesis. The only arbiter for competing hypotheses, that is to say, Craig is saying, well, do you have any other explanation? The only way for two competing hypotheses to exist inside of natural science is experiment. But the fact that evolution doesn't even provide an experiment it's sitting outside of the bounds of what's considered a scientific theory. It's basically a massive story, a hunch, a post-diction justification. You're looking back in time, you're imagining what could have happened, and then you go and try to find evidence for the story that you've told, right? So it's all confirmation bias. If the observation in evolution is variation of organisms, if Craig wants to try to take us through the scientific method and prove that evolution is a scientific theory, I would want to know his observation. Most of the time they say variation of life itself, right? That's the observation. Now, the assumed cause, I'm still waiting from any evolution proponent to tell me the assumed cause, because that's how science works. So my argument today is pretty simple. Premise one is a scientific theory is the product of the scientific method. Premise two, evolution cannot be run through the scientific method. Conclusion, evolution is not a valid scientific theory. So what is it? Well, it's a story. It's a hunch. It's basically looking at reality as it is and making an assumption about a past that you can't observe, and then trying to find some sort of supportive evidence for the past you can't observe. And that's pretty much all it is. Now, conflating adaptation at the local level, at the molecular level, looking at what bacteria does and doesn't, has nothing to do with the claim that every animal we see today comes from a previous kind of animal or a different population altogether that it all branches from. There's actually no evidence of this. I can give a hypothetical to demonstrate Craig wouldn't even know how to delineate between a fossil he found that matches his hunch and a fossil he found that doesn't match his hunch. In fact, when they point to, notice how when they bring up, say, transitional fossils, there's nothing that's not a transitional fossil. So when they say we found a transitional fossil and I ask, are there any fossils that aren't transitional? And he says no, so the distinction, it doesn't matter. So if everything's a transitional fossil, then finding one you might as well pick up anything out of the ground and call it a transitional fossil, because under evolution, it has to be transitional. That doesn't really tell us anything. It doesn't tell us how things change. It just says a story that things change. So that's another problem evolution has, is when you tell the story from a broad view, it sounds like a compelling story. It sounds almost correct. When you ask granular questions about what is actually occurring that makes this long process do its thing, they're at a loss for words. They basically just say it happens. Well, it just happened. Over time, it happened. Clearly, it happened. Well, I don't even think Craig or any other evolution proponent could actually tell me what happened. Like, what is actually happening? So there's a famous mathematician and astronomer who stated the following in regards to astronomy. He said, I think this also applies to evolution. He said, as far as hypotheses are concerned, let no one expect anything certain from astronomy, which cannot furnish it, lest accept that as the truth idea is conceived for another purpose, and depart from the study a greater fool than when he entered. This applies to evolution because you don't have the ability to manipulate anything inside the evolution paradigm. All you have is the ability to manipulate things at the adaptive level, at the molecular level, at the local level. This says nothing. This demonstrates nothing about the macro, what's often called macroevolution. It says nothing about what happened. It says something about what you can observe happening. These are two different things. I would argue that evolution itself, as a large worldview, is almost religious, and in the sense that what it does is it takes what might be true at the particular level, and then it says it's true about the whole, which is a basic composition fallacy. This essentially is the argument against evolution. Being a proper scientific theory, evolution cannot produce a viable hypothesis, and it cannot be taken through the scientific method. Scientific theories are the product of the scientific method. They are not the beginning of the scientific method, and what we'll hear tonight is a bunch of beginning stories, then some supporting analogies or evidence to try to buttress the assumption. Well, the assumption is what's in question. I'm not granting the assumption.
You got it. And with that, want to let you know a couple of quick housekeeping things. Folks, first, very exciting to share that Modern Day Debate is helping promote and participate in, as I'll be flying out to be the moderator, this epic debate between Andrew Wilson and AP on whether or not Christians should be Zionists. It's going to be in Asheville, North Carolina. You don't want to miss it. Check out the link in the description box. Grab tickets now. There's even an option for a free ticket. Highly encourage you. It's going to be amazing. You don't want to miss it. As well as, very excited that for that particular debate, we are doing a fundraiser. So as you can see at the bottom right of the screen, lens fundraiser. These lenses will be used at that debate, as well as future debates between Modern Day Debate and Uncensored America. For example, our upcoming collaboration series called Outnumbered. We're going to use them over and over. Check out the GoFundMe link at the top of the live chat and the top of the description box. You don't want to miss it. Help us make these debates a reality, and thanks for your support. With that, gentlemen, thank you very much. The floor is all yours for open dialogue.
Okay.
So, Craig, oh, sorry, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I think you kind of have some misunderstandings about what a scientific theory is in relation to the scientific method. It's not just a product of the scientific method. A scientific theory is something that is well substantiated with a body of facts, including observable experimentation and following the scientific method. Its scientific method is just one aspect of having a scientific theory. The scientific method is itself just a method of helping us determine if a hypothesis has been falsified or not. It's not the entirety of the scientific theory. So I think some misunderstandings of terminology there could help towards your confusion.
Okay. Are you saying that a scientific theory is necessary, the scientific method is necessary for a theory, but other things can be included?
Yeah, it's part of. The scientific method is, it's not the scientific method is something that we use to try and falsify a hypothesis. That's just all it is. A scientific theory is a different thing. Using the scientific method as part of our experimentation process to then get, okay, so we now have a scientific theory. Yeah, it's part of it. But you were like, well, it's the product of the scientific method, which is just kind of a misinterpretation. And I just want
I want to just clarify, is it possible to develop a scientific theory without the scientific method?
The scientific method is what you use to try and falsify a hypothesis. So if you want to have a hypothesis in your scientific theory, then you need to use the scientific method to get to that. But you're saying, right, is this one thing that slots in here? You're not understanding what the scientific method is. The scientific method isn't just a thing that slots in.
Craig, you didn't answer. Let
me finish what I'm saying. A scientific method isn't just the scientific method isn't just something that slots in as part of this or that. It is a process. It is a tool. All I'm saying is it's incorrect to say the scientific theory is just a product of the scientific
I didn't say
method.
just. I didn't say
you
just.
Did. That
Do you
was
agree?
The word you said.
Craig.
But anyway, I just wanted
You're gish galloping, bro. You're gish galloping.
No, I'm literally not. I just wanted to clear that up.
Literally.
And Jimbob, when I give you an
you didn't
explanation,
answer my question.
you say I'm gish galloping. That's not my fault. You don't understand, and I just
let me know when you're
directly answer your question.
Okay.
So yes.
Well, the question was this: can you produce a scientific theory without the scientific method? I didn't get a clear answer on that. I'll put it in premise form, Craig.
I've already answered that. Asked and answered.
Interrupting.
Yeah,
a scientific.
We can move on.
Interrupting again.
All right, one at a time.
Okay. Yes or no? Yes
just
or no
saying,
is my
I've asked and answered.
Okay, you're keep interrupting.
One at a time,
just
gentlemen. I have to break
for
it
the
into 1
purposes of
2
this
minute
debate,
segments.
I absolutely refuse
Hold
to
on a
continually
second.
answer the same question.
I'm going
if I have
to
answered
break
the
it
question,
into
I
1 or
will
2
move
minute
on.
segments. Okay, just gonna. Okay. Who asked the most recent question?
I'm asking a question, and it's a yes or no question, and I didn't get an answer, and so I'll ask it a different way. Okay.
Okay, wait, hold on one sec. Okay, Craig, you feel like you answered it?
Yes, my entire spiel that I just gave there answered the question, so now the conversation can move on.
So
if Jimbob wants to continually answer the question, ask the question over and over, I will just say asked and answered.
Wow.
That's it.
Wow.
We just want to, to see, okay, so you're saying, all you have to say is just, yep, I answered it.
Yes,
okay,
I've answered it.
Made by Jim.
Okay. All right, I'll just take the...
Because honestly, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but need you to take a deep breath. So what we're going to do is break it into 1 minute segments. All right. So Craig said that he answered it. So Jimbob will give you a chance for 60 seconds uninterrupted. Floor is all yours. Let's see. So I'm just click ask to unmute so that way you can speak. So there should be a little window that pops up on your Zoom window.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep. Ready for you.
Well, in all of those words, I'm going to take it as a yes, that a scientific theory needs to actually go through the scientific method. Otherwise, what are we talking about? Further, if there's two hypotheses, I would argue that the only way to arbitrate between two competing hypotheses is exactly that, the experiment, which is the scientific method. So the reason I asked Craig, is a scientific theory something that has to be at the tail end of the scientific method? And I didn't get a clear answer on that.
Asked and answered.
You're just going to... Please answer it again for the audience.
No, I've refused to answer questions multiple times.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine if you don't want to answer. Okay,
no, I've already answered it, and everybody heard me answer it, Jimbob. If you didn't understand the answer, that's a you problem.
Okay. Would you say that evolution is a scientific theory?
It 100% is a scientific theory. It's a stone cold brilliant definition of a scientific theory.
Beautiful.
Would you like me to explain to you how it is a scientific theory?
No, not really.
In fact, I'm gonna explain.
No. This is my cross-examination. This is a cross-examination.
No, there's no cross-examination. You asked the question, and I'm gonna answer.
There's no cross-examination of your affirmative position.
You've just asked the question, and I'm gonna answer it.
It's a series of questions.
I do apologize that the beginning of your sentence interrupted.
He's not allowing me to run a line of questions, James.
All right, gentlemen. So I do. We could do this where it's a cross-exam where each of it's 10 minutes.
Oh no, I didn't agree to a cross-examination.
Craig, I'm not with my sentence. For crying out loud! If I'm still in the middle of a sentence,
I apologize. It's just Jimbob appears to be trying to run.
All right, dear gosh, what is wrong with you? All right, if I'm still talking, like, why are you? I'm gonna just start talking while James is midway half sentence. Like, shut your trap and let me finish. So both of you, we're gonna do 10 minutes of cross exam. That's one theoretical. We could keep going with open dialogue, but it seems like neither of you really wants to allow the other to ask a series of questions. We could do 1 minute segments, just back and forth, 60 seconds for one guy, 60 seconds for the other. What are you guys wanting to do?
I'd very much like an open conversation if Jimbob is willing to actually have
Hey,
a
we
conversation.
got you. Yep. Open conversation. That's the answer, not the if Jimbob is blah, blah, blah. All right, Jimbob, short answer. What do you want to do?
If it's an open conversation, in conversations about in debates, have questions, have cross-examination in the conversation. So if I'm going to ask a question,
what do you want to do, Jimbob?
I want to cross-examine. I want to cross-examine his affirmative, which is a fucking debate. That's what a fucking debate is.
You want to cross-examine? Great. Okay. So it sounds like you guys are not willing to meet in the middle. Like, Craig, are you willing to do any sort of cross-exam?
Yeah. If we can actually, agree on some terms. The problem is that Jimbob is trying to define terms.
So yes, how long? You want to get a fucking debate on?
Yeah,
like,
no,
let's
I'm
go.
cool. That's what I want. I want the debate. That's why I'm saying let's just have the debate. But Jimbob doesn't want to.
You guys
really?
So what we're gonna do is we'll do 5 minutes where Jimbob will ask questions to Craig, and then we'll switch it where Craig will ask questions to Jimbob. 5 minutes. Fair?
Yeah, cool. Does that mean I get to answer the questions, though? That's the thing.
If they're yes or no, yes.
No,
here we go.
Questions can't always
5
be yes
minutes. The timer is set. Jimbob,
Okay.
now's your chance to ask questions to Craig.
Craig, you said that evolution is a scientific theory, okay? Would you say evolution, being a scientific theory, can be run through the scientific method?
100% yes.
Okay. So if evolution can be run through the scientific method, can you give me the observation that you start with?
Let me see. I've got it all written down here. Observation. Bacteria sometimes develop new traits or resistance under pressure.
Okay. And so if the scientific method asks a question about what you're observing bacteria do a thing, and then what's the question you're asking in the scientific method about that observation?
Can we observe evolution happening in a lab environment across generations?
No, that's another observation.
No,
you're restarting.
No,
yes,
it's not a question.
Can we observe is an observation, Craig.
Yes, it's a question. Is it a question? It has a question mark at the end. Therefore,
okay.
Jimbob,
okay.
it is a question.
Enough.
Enough. Didn't he ask? Can we observe?
Yes, I said this, James.
Jimbob, I'm
dude, stop.
I haven't.
You're not asking a question.
I'm answering the question. I'm trying to answer the question. If you could allow me the courtesy of answering the question.
Okay, go ahead. Like, you're burning up time. Can you observe?
Yeah. Can you observe evolution happening in a lab environment across generations? That is a question.
Directly to the answer.
Yeah.
So in the scientific method, the observation is the beginning. Then you ask a question about the phenomenon you're observing. Yes. Notice when I asked Craig what, because you're leading to the hypothesis, what causes the phenomenon you're observing. Notice when I asked what the question is, Craig went back to another observational question. Now he's back at he's back at the start of the scientific method.
The question can be an observation. It doesn't need to not be an observation. The question can be, oh, can I see this happening? That can absolutely be a question.
Yeah, that's another question.
The question can also be, why is this happening? The question can be whatever I want it to be, Jimbob. You don't understand how the scientific method works. Now, the next step would be the hypothesis.
So much gish galloping.
I'm in the middle of talking. The next step would be a hypothesis. The hypothesis would be, if E. coli has grown for thousands of generations, it will evolve to become better adapted to its environment. That is a direct hypothesis coming from the question that was answered. The next step from that would be making a prediction based on the hypothesis. You can shake your head all you like, but I'm the one with the physics degree.
No.
The next step would, after the hypothesis, is you can make a prediction. The prediction would be, if I put the E. coli in a solution that would stop it being able to breed itself because of poison, then
what the fuck? So if you poison something and it dies, that's evolution. Jews,
I haven't
dude,
finished my sentence. Here's the
you're
thing, Jim.
gish
I
galloping,
haven't
bro.
finished my I'm going to finish
You're
what I'm saying.
gish galloping
no,
a
I'm not.
story.
If I'm going to finish what I'm saying, and that's the problem. You listen to half
All right.
of what I said. Right?
You're just. I want my time back then.
The prediction is if I put the E. coli in a solution that is poisonous to it, will it evolve to adapt to be able to overcome that poisonous solution?
That's a different. That's a different hypothesis than evolution.
Not. That is
yes,
a prediction from the hypothesis.
Let me answer.
Let me. That's a
dude, this is James. This is absurd,
right,
dude.
We're gonna go to the next.
We're
gonna go.
Absolutely absurd.
What's your question, Jimbob, that you'd like to ask?
I wanted Craig to take me through one observation to a hypothesis. Dude.
Hey, Craig, shut up so we can actually get this. I'm just giving Jimbob a chance to say what he was asking.
I want a simple observation that leads to a hypothesis. Craig went from observing one thing to then introducing poison. Okay, that's a prediction. Can you control yourself? That's a different observation, dude.
It's not. It's a prediction.
That for a different observation.
No, for the same observation.
Okay, so naturally in natural science, do you see bacteria getting poisoned?
Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
Cool.
That's what medication is.
That's a different observation than you originally said. Yes, it is.
If you will give me just 2 minutes uninterrupted to.
Let's just give you 5 minutes. Yeah. Right? Give me.
If you want me to, you asked me the question, Jimbob. Can I take you through the scientific method with an observation? I am doing exactly that.
What's the observation?
The observation is bacteria sometimes develops new traits or resistances under pressure.
Okay.
Do we agree?
That's great.
Do we agree?
Great. That's an observation. Great. Now the next question in the scientific method is what causes that?
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
What else would the question be?
The question doesn't have to be what causes that. We can just.
What's the hypothesis?
That comes after. You're not letting me Jimbob, you ask me a question, you don't let me answer. So you ask the question. What is the question? The question is, can we observe evolution happening in a lab experiment across generations? Right? That is the question I have developed from my observation. Now, we have the hypothesis. The hypothesis is if E. coli is grown for thousands of generations, it will evolve to become better adapted to environment. That is a logical progression from the observation question hypothesis. The next part is the prediction. The prediction is if you put the E. coli in a solution that is poisonous to it, it will adapt to the pressures and overcome the poison. The next step is the experiment. And this experiment has been going on since 1988 and is still ongoing
adaptation.
today. In fact, the longest ongoing experiment. I said 2 minutes. You said you give me 2 minutes.
So adaptation.
Answering your question.
Craig, observing adaptation and calling it evolution are two different things.
No, it's not.
Then why are you using different words?
Adaptation is part of evolution. Adaptation is evolution. Evolution is adapting to your environment.
Dude, James, this is insane. This is insane.
We do have to have the actual questions. So what was your question, JD?
If adaptation is one thing and evolution is a different thing, then you can't make them synonymous exactly, okay? So when you say I watch something adapt, you're watching something at the local level adapt, like change to some sort of inputs, okay? This is not what's in question tonight. What's in question tonight is some sort of transmutation. It's some sort of macro change back in time, evolution, the story of evolution, of how animals and populations diversified over time at the macro, large scale animals, sexual selection, all of that, right? We're not looking at a petri dish. All you're doing for the audience is saying, I looked at something change and react to stimuli, therefore what?
Okay, so there is no difference between macro and micro evolution. Evolution is evolution. You trying to separate them is a disingenuous tactic used by evolution deniers, right? It's not a difference. The fact that it can happen in a short time or a long time is the same thing. The evidence of it happening is that we can make it happen in a short time. We can also go to the London Underground mosquitoes, who literally became a different species, unable to interbreed with other mosquitoes within decades because of the
Why are you calling it a mosquito?
I'm in the middle of a sentence.
So it's a mosquito, but not a mosquito?
I'm in the middle of a sentence. Because of the pressures of the environment they are. Evolution is literally adapting to environmental pressures. That is the definition of evolution. Adaptation is part of the process.
Okay, Craig, if adaptation and observing adaptation at the local level is evolution, why would you need to produce an experiment if the observation is identical to the term evolution, dummy?
Because we have to test a hypothesis, dummy.
No, look, do you understand the problem you're in?
There is no problem. I have no problem. You are the one that doesn't understand evolution. You are the one that is disingenuously trying to separate macro and micro evolution like they're different things.
Where we basically break this up. Craig, you have 5 minutes to ask questions of Jimbob.
Okay. I mean, I'm here to offer evidence for evolution, but Jimbob is trying to separate the things. So I don't really have questions for him because I was here to answer his questions about evolution.
You mean a cross-examination?
He hasn't authored an alternative to evolution.
That's question begging.
No, it's not. It's part of the debate. There's no question begging there.
No, look, okay.
In a debate, I'm talking. In a debate, both parties have to present evidence for their case. Okay. Right? My case is evolution is real. I've presented evidence for that. Jimbob hasn't presented evidence for an alternative. So I don't know how
this is more like
so much story.
This is more like your more opening statement, but this is a good time to ask questions to Jimbob.
Yeah, that's the point. I don't have any questions for Jimbob because he hasn't presented an alternative for me to cross-examine. So if Jimbob could present an alternative to evolution, then I could absolutely 100% ask him questions about that alternative. The thing is, I don't know what his position is, apart from I don't understand evolution. I have evidence for evolution, and I can explain evolution to him, but he's not even accepting the fact that evolution, there's no difference between micro and macro. He's just going, well, that's different, and I say it's different. I mean, what questions?
Tell me when you're done.
Please, tell me when you're done. Present your case for an alternative to evolution.
Well, first of all, presenting an alternative would appeal to the scientific method, being that the only arbiter for two competing hypotheses is an experiment in natural science. But if I can't even if you can't even take evolution through the scientific method, dude, I'm talking.
But I did that. Did you not remember?
Unbelievable. He can't control himself.
No, I'm just saying, Jimbob, I did that just now. Do you not remember?
Okay, so Craig also just said that observing adaptation at the bacterial level is observing evolution.
Yes.
If observation of adaptation is identical to evolution, then you're observing the theory that you're trying to prove by just naming it evolution. Now, if all you had to do, Craig, is observe bacteria, you wouldn't need to craft a scientific theory because your observation is literally the name of the theory, evolution.
If you just want to make assumptions, yeah, but the fact is in science, we like to observe something, ask a question about it, form a hypothesis, predict from that hypothesis, and then test that hypothesis, because we don't just go, oh, we saw a thing, we saw it happening, so therefore that's that.
Okay.
As in science, we like to go through the scientific method, and Jimbob, you are lying to everybody watching right now by saying I couldn't take you through the scientific method when I did exactly that. You not understanding the scientific method and disagreeing with the scientific method is a you problem.
Okay, cool. So this is the thing. If observing bacteria change and react to stimuli is evolution, then it's unnecessary to craft a hypothesis or a theory because you're literally observing the thing you're calling evolution everywhere.
No, it's not, because you do that to do science. You don't just go,
oh, wow, that's big brain stuff.
I'm talking, you don't just
do science.
You don't just look at it and go, well, that's that. Even if you think you've observed the thing happening and you call it that thing, you still do tests on that thing to make sure it is that thing. You go through the scientific method, like I have with you many times already, Jimbob, and you have just denied it.
Okay. Here, let's take a different approach here. Let's take like a cat, okay? A cat, would you agree that a cat is a sort of universal category of an animal?
A cat is a universal category of an animal.
Yeah, a cat's not a dog, right?
Well, no, a cat's not a dog. It's
Okay,
it's a
a cat.
genetically
Okay,
separate species.
gotcha. Was there a time under the evolutionary view where a cat, as we know it today, actually wasn't a cat? That it just didn't exist?
Yes, cats and dogs and you and I all have common ancestors.
Okay, so if the common ancestor for a cat was one thing, how do you look at bacteria changing and come to the conclusion that there was once an animal that's not a cat that the splintering from, fractioning from, became a cat, where a cat emerged from this process? How do you extrapolate the one to the other?
We look at the evidence we have, which is the fossil records that we do have, even if they're not 100% complete. We look at what we do have, we form hypotheses from all the information that we have, and we go, well, if this is what we think evolution is, then we can test it and see that we can change a species. Now, when you put E. coli into a solution that is poisonous to it, it literally becomes a different species of E. coli with different DNA and different attributes to survive within that solution that was previously poisonous.
How does, dude?
I mean, if you want me to get through an explanation,
you can't gish gallop, bro.
No, it's not gish galloping. It is me having an explanation, Jimbob. But the problem is, you don't let me get to the end and then interrupt. Right?
What did I ask you?
Just be quiet. You asked me if I can explain to you how we can have what was before a cat and say, well, there's now a cat, and then relate that to
That's
bacteria.
not what I asked you. Okay,
yes,
yeah.
Is.
So now, more clearly, how do you look at the local level of change, which I call adaptation to external stimuli?
Evolution.
Right?
That's what evolution is.
Stop. How do you look at that event and then extrapolate that a cat, right, through fossils now? How do you extrapolate that a cat comes from things that are not cats?
Because we look at the fossils that we do have, the fossils
How?
that don't. What do you mean, how? We take fossils.
You just look at them?
Am I allowed to answer the question? Right, Jimbo, you know when you ask a question, that's when you stop talking and let the other person speak. Cool? So, yes, we look at fossils, we examine them, we compare them to other skeletons and stuff that we have of different creatures. We compare them to other fossil records that we have. We do experiments on the DNA and stuff that we have within them, and we compare them to what is now, and we make inferences. And we use that as part of our hypothesis to then form predictions and do tests. Now, here's the thing. We don't have time machines, so we can't go back in time and test something for millions of years. But what we can do is start an experiment like there was one started in 1988 to continually test the hypothesis of evolution being adaptation to environmental pressures, right? You keep disingenuously trying to separate adaptation to environmental pressures from evolution. That's exactly what it is.
Okay, so when I asked you, how do you do this? You basically said you look at fossils, and then you said a bunch of other things, and you said you do tests.
Correct, I said a bunch of things.
It's my turn. Nothing in what you just said explained how you come to the conclusion, the extrapolation, by the way, assertion. Dude, let me talk. I just let you ramble. Shut up.
No, you're lying, though. I
Shut
just did.
up.
All right. I do have to jump in here. Craig, I know that I said something like shut the fuck up earlier or whatever it was. I do want to ask, let's allow Jimbob to finish this point. I promise we will come back to you, Craig.
It's annoying, isn't it, Jimbob, when people keep interrupting? It's really annoying, isn't it?
So when you find a fossil, let's call it a cat fossil, Craig. So that's a new observation now, right? So you found this thing and you bring it out of the ground. And now it's your job for the audience to tell me, how did you hold this fossil in your hand and come to the conclusion that a cat that we see today comes from this changing process of this fossil? Please tell us.
I already answered that, but I guess I'll answer it again because you like asking the same question multiple times. So we look at the fossil and we compare it to the fossil records that we have. We compare it to cats that exist today. We compare it to other big cats. We compare it to the skeletons of cats that we find mummified. And we look at the lineage and we go, well, that looks like that. And there's bits that change. Well, then there's bits that look like this different. That shows this adaptation. And then what we also do is we compare the time of the fossils to what was happening in the world at the time. So we could look at, say, a larger cat fossil And then maybe a little bit later, there was a smaller cat fossil, right? And then we looked at, well, why would that happen? Well, maybe at that time, there was a drought in the world. There was less resources available. So the proto-cat becoming smaller as an adaptation to the environmental pressures was something that would be suitable. And then we keep comparing it to all the fossil records that we have and compare those fossil records to the current cats that exist. And we make the inference that this comes from this, this, and this. And then to test the fact that species can change, we do experiments like the one that has been going on since 1988. So please don't ask the same question again.
That's amazing. So you told a story about what you think happened based on similarity. Hold on. If I find a fossil that looks like something today, I'll call this hypothetical camel world for the sake of simplicity. Okay. Right now, someone digs up an animal and it looks like a camel, but it's smaller. And voila, they say, wow, this is very similar. They come to the conclusion because they use your methodology of fairy tale telling, and they say, it must have, the camel we see today must have come from this camel because it's smaller and they're similar, okay? The observation is actually similarities, a similarity of one thing you found with something that you observed today. That's the observation, actually. That's not the conclusion. Now, in another part of the world, Craig, track with me here, let's say a Peruvian community finds the same exact type of fossil, right? These bones, and they erect it out and they giggle and they laugh and they point at it. Only they come to a different conclusion. They come to the conclusion that the thing they found, they already know what it is because it's still around, okay? Hypothetically, this thing's still around. So they have camels and they have this smaller thing that looks like a camel. They're both available to them in real time right now. Now, I'm asking you a question right now. When you find this smaller camel-looking thing in the ground, and it looks like the larger camel-looking thing, how do you use the observation called similarity, right, in phenotype? How do you come to the conclusion that one came from the other merely from similarity?
We compare it to all of the other evidence that we have showing similarity between other species as well, and we look at the transition between one thing and another. Yes, all fossils are transitional. That's something I completely agree
look at the thing you're assuming.
No, did you not? Okay.
How do you prove transition? You said you look at transition.
Maybe if you don't interrupt me with your assumptions of what I'm saying. Right, Jimbob. Okay, here's what I'm going to do.
How do you prove transition? You look at transition.
Here's what I'm going to do.
To be fair,
is I'm going to try and answer the question, and you're going to shut up. Right, you do comparative anatomy. You study the skeletal structure, skull shape, jaw configuration, teeth, spine, paws. Cats have unique traits like retractable claws, a specific carnassial tooth shape, a certain vertebrae flexibilities. If the proto-cat's bones share these hallmarks, then we can make an inference. You do genetic analysis, if available. Rare, but if there's DNA preserved, e.g. in Ice Age fossils, scientists compare it to modern feline genomes. Even degraded DNA can be partially reconstructed to find common markers. 3, you can use morphogenics. Use 3D imaging or digital calipers to measure bone proportions and angles. Run statistical comparisons with modern species to see how closely they line up. 4, fossil stratigraphy and dating. Date the fossil using radiometric techniques like carbon dating, uranium series, etc. Compare it to the timeline of known cat evolution. Does it fall in an area where cat ancestors were developing? Then it fits in the family photo. 5, biology. Location matters. Did this proto-cat live in a region where early fields evolved or spread? Fossils found along migration routes of early cats confirm ancestry. 6, phylogenetic analysis. Build a family tree using traits and or genetic data. See where the proto-cat fits among big cats, small cats, and other feline forms. If it branches off...
James.
He's
reading ChatGPT right now. This is insane.
To tell you, then let me fucking tell you.
You're reading us an essay, dude. You don't even know this shit. You're reading it from ChatGPT.
You wanted me to read it. You wanted me to tell you. Then let me tell you.
You're reading, dude.
Oh, sorry. Am I not allowed to read the thing that you
You're not allowed to have ChatGPT debate for you, dude.
I'm not using ChatGPT. You want me to tell you the thing you've asked me to? Then let me tell you.
Look,
if it
was
sounds
very
like
simple.
It's from ChatGPT, then who cares, right?
Dude,
it's the thing you asked for.
Unbelievable.
Hold on one sec. I do want to just jump in because it is fair that there's two ways to look at it. One is, Craig is going to share as many points as he can that are relevant to the question. And then likewise, at some point, if Jimbob wants to jump in and say like, okay, that's good enough. Like 3 or 4 examples or something. Like that's reasonable too. So, what was the exact question, Jim Bob? Did you tell him?
The question was this: if you find some bones that are similar to something that exists, the reason I use the analogy of the Peruvian group is that it could. How do you know that an animal just didn't die out? That could have just as well lived alongside the camel that looks similar to it. Do we see animals today that look similar to other animals that aren't the same animals? Yes. So the question of finding something and thinking in your head, well, this thing that exists today must have come from that thing, doesn't tell us whether or not that thing could have just as well died out. And if it lived, it could have lived alongside of the thing that it looks like. So I'm asking Craig, what methodology does he use to determine the thing he found didn't just die out and could have lived similar alongside the similar thing, or that the similarities itself draws out this extrapolated transition between one and the other. And he can't give me an answer. Why? Because the whole thing is conjecture.
Right. Okay. I'm going to say 9 things that answer your question. Right?
Oh, 9. Just 9?
Just 9, right? But it answered your question. So if you say,
let's go one at a time. One at a time. No, one at a time.
No, I'm going to just list the 9.
No, one at a time.
No, I'm going to list
one at a
the 9.
time.
I'm going to list
No,
the 9.
this is bullshit.
Comparative anatomy, genetic analysis, morphogenetics, fossil stratigraphy and dating, biogeography, phylogenetic analysis, unique shared derived traits, transitional features, pathology, and wear patterns. Those all answer your question specifically.
No, it doesn't. That lists things.
Yes, it does.
Craig, did you just
cry
list
all you
things?
Like. I just answered your question.
Craig, did your 9 things you list?
Say the fucking name right.
Craig. No, Craig. Craig, that's how I talk. That's how I talk. I can't change my mouth.
We have to. All right, let's get focused.
Craig.
That's not
the things you listed. Nothing. You didn't explain the answer to my question. You just listed things that you think answer the question. You didn't actually answer the question.
If you don't like the answer, that's your problem. But I've answered
you just listed things.
I also explained them previously, but you cried that I was explaining them.
Name the first one.
The comparative anatomy.
Okay, you compare things. That's what I asked. How do you determine something that looks similar? How do you determine that it comes from the thing that it looks similar to?
I answered that specifically. You didn't listen. Study the skeletal structure, skull shape, jaw configuration, teeth,
Stop
spine.
there. Stop there.
Don't interrupt me when I'm talking.
Stop there.
No.
One thing at a time.
No.
One claim at a time.
Listen.
How does skeletal structure?
Hold on one sec.
Jimbob, no.
This guy gets to yap.
What was the original question?
The original question was, how do you look at 2 things and you compare them and they look similar? And how do you draw out similarity equals one comes from the other? And Craig said skeletal analysis.
Yes,
okay,
and then I was explaining it.
Hold on. He's about to read off the rest of the 9 ChatGPT things, right?
No, I'm not
asking
reading the one thing that you asked me to.
How does skeletal analysis tell us one thing came from the other?
I was in the middle of saying that and you started crying. Right, so I'm going to do it again. Don't cry. Study the skeletal structure, i.e. skull shape, jaw configuration, teeth, spine, paws. Right? That's one part.
Study?
Yes, study.
What does that mean? What does that mean, Craig?
You never taught
study them. I'm studying them.
Yes, you study
them.
You look at them.
And you find that they're similar, right?
Yeah, right. Well, the next part is...
Craig, back to the first question.
Right? Cats have unique traits like retractable claws, a specific carnassial tooth shape, and certain varietal flexibilities. If this proto-cat's bones share these hallmarks, then we can make the inference that they are a similar species.
That is not what I'm asking.
Yes, it is!
I didn't ask whether things are similar, Craig. I asked you a question. When you look at similar things that share similar anatomy, phenotype, and functions, like claws and ears a certain shape and fur, how do you come to the conclusion that when you find a skeleton of such things, that it came from? All you're stating, audience, you can hear this, is he's stating similarities exist again.
Right. Well, that was one part. So 1 was the comparative anatomy, right? So that's one of the 9 things that I said. So yes, that is one of the things you do. You look to see if they are similar. But that's kind of important.
Are you insane?
Shut up.
How do you determine similar things come from each other? You look at if they're similar.
I am talking. That is one of the things that you do, Jimbob. You look to see if they are similar. That is very important when trying to find if an old thing is similar to a new thing. You look to see if they are similar. That
what was my question?
Comparative anatomy. Right?
What did I ask?
The next part is you do some kind of genetic analysis if that's available. Right? That's another way to help. One of the things that you do, right? You can do genetic analysis if there is DNA available. Rare, but sometimes the case. Right? Okay? Any questions on that?
No, yeah, I'll just summarize what happened here. Is I asked, how do you look at
questions on that?
Dude, shut up. You look at two things that
no,
you look at two things that are similar. You dig up something and it looks similar to this other thing. And I asked, how do you determine that similarity?
I'm in the middle of answering that
shut
question,
up.
No, I'm in the middle of answering.
This is a good opportunity. Go ahead, Jimbob and Craig, if you can give Jimbob a chance to finish. And then likewise, though, Jimbob, to be fair, there are occasions where you've interrupted Craig. So I do want to...
Oh, yeah, I'm just giving the energy back that I've been getting, James. I hope you understand that. Jimbob instantly started interrupting, so I've gone FTFE on him. He is the one that's decided how this debate's gone completely.
Thank you.
So, Jimbob, if you can control your impulses, then I will
I'm
do it
talking
also.
still. Yeah,
I was talking there, right? If you, Jimbob, can control your impulses, then I will do the same. The debate is in your hands.
Okay, cool. So when I asked, when you find something, a skeleton, and it looks similar to something that exists today, how do you determine the similarity equals it came from this, the thing we have today comes from this thing? Being that today there are similar things that live alongside each other, right? And so the question is, how do you draw from similarity, similarity in jaw structure, similarity in anatomy, similarity in bone structure, all the things you listed? The answer I got from Craig is you look at their similarities.
As one of the things, yes. Yeah, absolutely. As one of the things, Jimbob.
That's a good answer to you?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, because that is one of the things you do. Look at the similarities. Okay. That is very important.
Okay. Okay. So I just want the audience to understand, when I ask the question, when you look at things that are similar, how do you determine that one came from the other? And the answer is you look at how they're similar.
You compare the similarities. Yes, Jimbob. Okay. You do comparative anatomy, Jimbob.
Okay, cool. Cool.
No, Jimbob, I'm talking. Once again, you just interrupted me. Remember, the debate is in your hands. So if you can have impulse control, I will do the same. This is now the part where I talk. Okay? So, yes, you absolutely 100% compare them. You look at the similarities. You see, oh, well, this tooth is very similar to that in this specific way. Oh, that's very interesting. That's one of the things you do. That's one of the things that helps you come to the conclusion. Another thing you can do is, once you've done that, is some genetic analysis if the DNA is available. That can help you see if they are the same. Okay?
Okay.
So that's the next part we're on to, is genetic analysis if available. Because yes, looking to see if they are similar, instead of just, well, they're kind of similar. You actually study very carefully. Oh, they're definitely similar. So let's see if there's other similarities, like some genetic similarities. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying to determine whether or not similarities prove that one thing comes from the other, you study more similarities.
No, science doesn't deal in proofs. You should please understand that there is no such thing as scientific proof.
I'm using a colloquially.
Okay, right, cool. Well, we're having a scientific discussion, so it's part
okay, let's get more granular, Craig, because you know this will keep circling around.
I asked the question there, bud. To be fair,
what's the question?
The question was: do you agree that after doing comparative anatomy, as in studying to confirm if they are similar, the next step that you could do if available is some kind of a genetic analysis? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that would just be looking at more similarities.
Yes, to see if they are the same, to see if that species came from that species.
No, we still haven't got...
That's one of the things that we would do next is
we still didn't get there.
Genetic analysis, right? If we want to know if that is what this cat came from, you would compare the DNA and look for DNA that is similar to the old one. Now, here's the thing. You can look at old DNA, right, and compare it to new DNA. And the difference will be, there will be new bits added. There will be new bits of information, right? But you can go, oh, that strand of DNA, that exists exactly here. And you can then say, oh, they're 99% similar, right?
Craig. Okay, so is it true from an evolutionary view that there is something in the cat ancestry common that doesn't look like a cat, that's not similar to a cat?
Sorry, ask that question again.
Inside the evolutionary view, is it true that there is an ancestor of the cat that isn't similar to the cat?
Oh, if you want to go back before the,
Before cats.
Before even mammals and stuff.
Well, no.
Right, to answer the question specifically,
dude,
everything looked different at some point. There is an
Okay.
ancestor of cats that looked completely nothing like cats. There's
Okay,
an ancestor
cool.
of man that looked nothing like man. In fact, they're the same ancestor.
Got you. So, okay, if what you're proving that one thing came from the other, and the criteria you're using is similarity in phenotype, skulls, DNA, and all these things, but your assumption under your assumption under evolution is that if you go back a little bit further, there's something that's not similar to a cat in their phenotype, in their structure, in the way they look. Then if you're not using similarity at that point, how do you come to the conclusion that there's a thing that is a predecessor of the cat that's not a cat?
Well, again, at that point, you would say, so let's take the proto-cat fossil, okay, and then compare that to a fossil from even earlier. You would do the same thing. Between the proto-cat fossil and the proto-proto-cat fossil, you would do comparative analysis between them. You would have a look for similarities that show that this could have possibly come from that. You would, again, if possible, do some kind of DNA thing, or morphogenics by using 3D imaging, fossil stratigraphy, biography, all these things that each step of the fossil, right? It might be that a fossil from a really, really long time ago doesn't look like its genetic predecessor. It doesn't look like that.
So how do you know it is if it's dissimilar?
Because
how do you know it's the predecessor then if it's not
like I said,
similar?
You look at the line, right? It might be similar. It might have similarities to the proto-cat, but not similarities to the current cat.
How do you know it is the cat, the proto-cat, if it's dissimilar?
No, I just said it might have similarities to the proto-cat, but not
if it's not. If it's not similar.
Well, you would compare it to another line of the fossil.
What?
You just keep going back. You just keep
zooming.
Older fossils, and you look for similarities between those, showing that these similarities went on in the genetic line, in the diversity. There's so many ways of studying to see if things are similar. Right, but that's the thing, right? The big thing, Jimbob, is that we don't have a time machine, right? And we can't go back.
You just got to make it up. Yeah, no, I agree. You got to make it up.
Well, science is about assumptions. You have to make.
So you agree? It's a totally assumption. Gotcha. Evolution is assumption.
All of science is assumptions.
Great. So it's not a fact.
The foundation of science is making assumptions and testing those assumptions, right?
I agree.
So what we do, we have made this assumption. Based on all the evidence and inferences that we've got, we have made the assumption that there is this thing called evolution, right? That's our hypothesis. Let's say that our observation in this case is literally all the stuff that you and I have talked about, all the different proto-cat and pre-proto-cat, all of the fossils, all the similarities, all the non-similarities. We've taken all of this evidence, right? And we have just formed the hypothesis that there is this thing called evolution that is the adaptation to processes, right? The next step is to try and falsify that hypothesis. So the only way that we can falsify this hypothesis is by doing tests within our own lifetime, because that's we don't live over millennia,
but Craig, if every fossil you find, you already call it a transitional fossil. How could you possibly falsify that statement? Yeah, I know. How can you falsify?
We're not trying to falsify.
Hold on, let me fucking get a question out.
Sorry, apologies. I didn't mean. No, I'm just saying, Jimbo. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I do apologize. I was just trying to clarify the question. I am sorry.
Okay.
Please don't get so angry.
I forgive you. So, how can you falsify something if you find a fossil and you just assume it has to be in the line of some ongoing transition of types of animals? If everything is a transitional fossil and you go in with that assumption, how could you falsify that?
Well, the thing is, of course, everything is transitional. We're transitional, right? Everything is transitional. And
that's the assumption.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's what we have to test.
How do you falsify it?
By testing it, by making a prediction, right?
How do you falsify it?
I've just told you, by making a prediction and testing.
What prediction? What prediction?
The prediction is that we can go back to the E. coli. The prediction is that if this is what evolution is, and there is a progression, then we can test if organisms can adapt to pressures in environment, right? That is what our assertion is from all of the evidence that we've got, is that organisms adapt to pressures in their environment. So that is our hypothesis. So we have to try and falsify that hypothesis in a way that we can. And the most conclusive way that I've seen of trying to falsify that hypothesis is the E. coli test that's been going on since 1988, where they got a particular strain of E. coli that was resistant to most things, and they created a solution that would destroy it, right? And over time, the stronger bits of that E. coli were the ones that survived and propagated, adapted to that environmental pressure. So then they increased the strength of
Craig,
the resistive thing.
I got
and
it.
On and on and on.
I got it.
That is
I got
how
it.
we test that hypothesis.
Okay. Hold on. Isn't it possible, logically and practically, for E. coli reacting and overcoming stimuli? Isn't it possible that that could exist and be true, and a protocat isn't true?
We don't know.
Is it possible?
This is the way that we test our hypothesis. Well, our hypothesis, the reason we did that test is because of our hypothesis of evolution. So
I'm going to ask it again. You're not answering the question. So if
yes,
it
is possible that exists without that being a thing. But the point is that is our test of that hypothesis.
Then that doesn't. No, that's a contradiction.
No, it's not. We are simply.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. We are simply testing the hypothesis of if organisms adapt to environmental pressures, because that's what we are claiming evolution is. We're not. Hold on. We're not claiming that evolution is some magical thing where a fish becomes a monkey or anything like that. We are simply claiming that every single organism on Earth will adapt to the environmental pressures that it exists within.
Okay,
right?
I understand,
Whether
Craig.
that happens slowly or over a long time, we can only test the hypothesis of it actually happening.
Craig, for an organism, whether it's multicellular or tiny and single, if an organism reacts to stimuli and adapts, isn't it the case that it has to first be itself?
Well, it's
in other words,
because of the adaptations that is previously
Hold on. For a larger animal like a cow to react to stimuli and respond to it accordingly, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't the cow have to already be a cow? Yes or no?
The cow is a cow because of its adaptation to stimuli.
So it wasn't a cow, and the reaction to stimuli made it a cow?
Yes.
Interesting. So what was it before it was a cow?
Whatever the ancestor of that was. I don't know the exact name.
Okay, but this is science now. What? Yeah. How do you prove that an external...
No, it's not science. You don't prove in science. Just so you
How do you... Dude, I already established that we use that colloquially. How do you demonstrate that an external stimuli can be introduced to one organism type and the reaction over time is to become another organism?
Yeah, I already answered that by doing the E. coli experiment, or we can go back to the London Underground mosquitoes, which literally became a different species.
What's the new species?
It's a different species of mosquitoes.
What is it called? Oh, it's a mosquito, but it's not a mosquito?
No, it's a completely different species.
Oh, it's a mosquito, but it's not a mosquito.
Like you and I are mammals, right? But we're very different. Cats and us are both mammals,
is that a mosquito?
Right?
Oh, Craig,
there's
Craig,
different species of mosquitoes, right? The point is, don't keep saying Craig when I'm talking.
Craig,
no, I'm talking.
Hold on. One claim at a time.
Please, no,
one claim at a time, buddy.
I'm talking.
I asked how, dude. No, you need clarification. No, no.
Jimbob, sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. All right, dude. Forgive me. First of all, I love both you guys. I appreciate you're both passionate. So if I ever sound cranky, I just hope you know I appreciate you guys, and I actually do appreciate your spiritedness. But just to be sure, do you guys want to do a different type of format? Like, let's say something like, 2-minute, back and forth. Do you want to go back to like a very
30 seconds?
Yeah, we can do that if that's cool.
Sure. I got the timer set.
Okay. So when you use the mosquito, the universal of mosquito maintains even if the type of mosquito changes and can't procreate with the previous mosquito. When I brought up the cow, what you said was the cow was once not a cow. That's different than saying a mosquito has a different type of mosquito that follows, okay? Now you're making this giant leap between cow and a previous thing that wasn't a cow, and I asked, can you introduce something to the non-cow where the reaction to the stimuli, it becomes not a cow? And you said, we do it all the time. Look at these mosquitoes. And then you go on to say...
30 seconds is up.
Yeah. It's still called a mosquito because that's what we're calling it. We could call it something else. We are just still calling it a mosquito. We could change the name. We could call a proto-cow still a cow.
Can we call it a cow?
Sorry,
could we call the mosquito? Can we call the mosquito?
Seconds.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I forgot about the format. My bad.
Yeah. You can call it whatever you want. The fact is, it has become a different species. It is something that is unable to breed with the other mosquitoes. It probably should have a different name because it's no longer part of that same species. So, what was a cow, before it was not a cow, it's just a name that we have given it. It is still a different species because of adaptations to environmental pressures.
Okay. It sounds like that under the evolutionary view, the term species is actually not an objective term. It's it's basically a nominalist view that there's only particular animals that are ever changing. And so when we point to a cow, we're only arbitrarily calling it a cow because it's actually in the process of changing to being not a cow, right?
Everything's changing. You're right. That's kind of the point that we had earlier, Jimbob, is that everything is transitional. So
Hinduism. So you're a Hindu.
I'd say I'm more of a Buddhist, if anything. I'm trying to be anyway. But the point is, everything is transitional because we are constantly changing. Humans, insects, fish, everything is constantly adapting to the environmental pressures that we exist in. That's just a fundamental fact of life, and that's all evolution is. And that doesn't even go against God or anything, because God could have set that process in action. But the fact is, we do see species adapting to environmental pressures. You go back to Charles Darwin and the Galapagos Islands with the finches. Over the decades that he kept going back to that island, he saw that the finches change from one type of finch to another that then had a
That's a contradiction.
Name. It's not.
So if evolution has a contradiction in it, right?
What's the contradiction?
The contradiction is to make the claim that evolution happens assumes these universal categories called species or populations of species.
Those are just names. That's the thing.
I understand. Hold on a second. If premise one is evolution relies on the assumptions of universal species, types of animals that are themselves and not other things, and premise two is there's no such thing as types of species, because everything's always changing, right?
Yeah.
So these two can't coexist.
Well, let's just take the labels of species and everything out of it. It's kind of irrelevant. That's just biological terminology to try and identify things, right? The fact of it is, if you remove all the labels, what we see is every organism on Earth adapts to the environmental pressures that it lives in. If it doesn't do that, it dies.
Craig,
it doesn't exist anymore, right? The species dies out, right?
Like progressives.
Okay, yeah, funny.
So that's 30 seconds. So if it's true that you could just as well call the next mosquito in your example not a mosquito, why would you assume the first one's a mosquito, Craig?
Because the mosquito is just a name that we gave it. It could be, we could call it Fred. It really doesn't matter, right?
No, we're talking about the word.
That is just a name that we have given that particular thing.
We're not talking about the word mosquito. Okay, that's the symbol we use in sound. I'm not talking about that, Craig. I'm actually talking about the universal category of what a mosquito is. Now, when I point to a mosquito, Craig, are you saying that I'm actually not certain it's not a cat?
I mean, it's got genetic similarities to a cat. But
can I call a mosquito a cat?
If you want to call a mosquito a cat, you can do it. No one's going to stop you.
Under the evolutionary view, is it consistent to be able to call a mosquito a cat?
No.
Why not?
Because they are at this point different species, different things.
That's a contradiction.
It's not. That's the thing. They are different.
You contradicted yourself.
Remove the word species. They are different organisms with different DNA that look and sound and act different. This particular setup of organs and skeletons and muscles and fibers and hair, we call that a cat, particularly Frisbee. That's my black cat. But this particular bundle of organs and fibers of probably some kind of exoskeleton or mosquito, right? We call that a mosquito, right? They are both, if we want to break it all down, they both exist of the same things. They're both made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. It's just the arrangement of them are different. And that arrangement of them is a particular arrangement because of the
Well, it's
environmental
not.
pressures that it's existed in.
Craig,
We'll do
Craig,
30
if the
seconds from Jimbob.
Craig, if the particular arrangement is always changing, you don't have a universal arrangement of these things. That's a contradiction.
I never said there was a universal arrangement.
You said
I
these.
said we're all made
I,
of
30
the same
seconds.
things.
30 seconds. 30 seconds. Remember?
Yeah, sorry, I was just responding to you.
If the thing you're pointing to, you said we're all made of the same things, and it's just the way we're arranged. The atoms and molecules are arranged, and this one thing called the cat is arranged in a certain way. But under evolution, it's actually not. It's not static. It's actually always changing. So it's actually a nominalist view. Hold on, I'm almost done.
Right,
It means that the thing you're calling a cat actually isn't holding its identity over time. It's molecules and things are changing over time, and there never is a static thing called a cat. There's only a particular thing that happens to be arranged to look like this other thing called a cat. This is nominalist cringe, bro.
I mean, that's getting down to a little bit of philosophy and stuff, and I kind of understand your point. But the fact is that that particular arrangement of atoms and protons, neutrons, electrons exists because of the previous arrangement. Was a result of the environmental pressures that the previous arrangement, right? And these arrangements have created communities that then breed amongst themselves and create new arrangements. And we're all made of the same stuff, but the reason we exist in this particular form is because of our group of stuff adapting to environmental pressures in a particular way. Oh, we are stuff. Come on. Jimbo, you and I exist exactly the same. We are made of the same thing. Stardust.
Well, you and I, no. Well, actually, Craig, you saying you and I assumes a category that evolution has to deny. So you're in another contradiction. Are we humans?
I definitely am.
Okay. Is there a point where we're not humans?
Well, you and I won't ever not be a human. But
okay,
our descendants could not be humans. They couldn't be known as something else.
Okay, got you. So is there a moment where something becomes human from not human under the evolutionary view?
Well, humans first really appeared as Homo sapiens about 200,000 years ago. Before that, they weren't considered Homo sapiens. They were whatever was before Homo sapiens, Homo erectus and things like that. We categorize Homo sapiens by the developmental process of the species, and that is just a part of the journey that our particular arrangement of stuff has had to go along.
Okay, and so from your view, could you is your view that you could introduce something, an external stimuli, to humans where they become no longer humans
over time?
Naturally.
Over time, yeah, right. So let's say there was a massive drought that lasted for centuries and centuries and centuries, right? And most humans died out, right? But the humans that survived were the ones that were able to, maybe live on very little moisture or draw moisture from the air. If breatharian's not real or whatever, but the ones that survived were the ones that were able to sustain themselves on the least amount of moisture, right? Now, their children would have some kind of thing that would allow them to live in that environment better, and it might be slightly different from before. And as their children have children, and their children have children, the adaptation to living in a place with a drought might change how the species looks. You might get smaller. Our brains might reduce. We might look very different then to what we consider a human now, because over the millennia, the children, the ones that survived, are the ones that had this mutation that allowed them to adapt to a different environmental pressure, and eventually that environmental pressure could change the way that people look, because we exist like this because this works good for now, for the world we live in, right? But there might be a world where this form isn't the ideal form. The ideal form looks very different, and the environmental pressures will go towards that, and the ones that survive are the ones that head towards that ideal form that reacts to the environmental pressures the best. So even though it's still human along the way. It might look very different to us now to what we consider human.
So it's all human. So everything before human is actually human. It's just we just arbitrarily call it not human, but it's actually the long process of the human.
to be what we are now, everything, we have the DNA of everything that's existed before. Human, again, it's just a label that we give ourselves.
I got you.
You know?
So this is another problem, and it is a philosophical problem, because you do need some philosophy to do science, and you definitely need philosophy to argue about evolution. The problem with it is that once you get into what the consequences, the entailment of the view, it's that anything you're pointing to that's changing from one thing to another is a contradiction, because there's no such thing as one thing and the other. It's all one continuous process.
But that's not a contradiction. That's just that is just how it is. At one point it was this.
There's no identity.
Yeah, but we have to take snapshots in time, right? If we take a
but it's false.
If we take a snapshot in time today, the snapshot in time today shows you and me and James and everyone watching as humans, as sharing mostly the same DNA, right? But if we extend that snapshot to cover 10,000 years, it's going to look a lot different. Then we extend that snapshot to cover 1,000,000 years. It's going to look even more different. There's going to be one end to the other is going to look very, very different. It's about time.
Craig, I agree with you that you're taking an arbitrary snapshot, but what I'm asking you is, if you zoom out to full scale, to the point where you can't even see Earth, right? Like everything's tiny. Isn't it true that from the evolutionary view, if you go to deep time level view of it, there's actually nothing really called a human? That just happens to be a micro shot in time, a framework of what we are right now. But on the long stream of things, across time, assuming common ancestry goes all the way back to bananas and simple things that share similar structural things as us, isn't it true that everything's everything from the evolutionary view?
Give me a sec. I'm just running that through my head. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Everything is everything, because we share a common ancestry with everything, but it's the particular environmental pressures that our species, our group, our category, whatever you want to call it, has taken to then be what we are. Yeah, we all came from the same thing, but there's been branches. Things have had to change, and there's many different reasons for that. Like, you look at say you go back millions of years when the continents were all together, Pangea or something, right? Us humans, whatever you want to call it, would have had to be rather similar, because it was all one continent, it was all kind of in one place. But then as those continents started spreading apart to go into colder parts, to warmer parts, the humans that were on those islands became very different. I mean, like, you compare Eskimos and stuff to people from South Africa. They've got differences within their genetics. Eskimos can survive in the cold a lot better. South Africans are much more adapted to heat and things, and droughts and stuff like that than Eskimos. And that is kind of showing that evolution happens even within our own species, because they're very different, right? And then you can look at the DNA. You could say, well, you've got African DNA, you've got Dutch DNA, you've got but we're all still humans. But we can still, even within the 200,000 years that humans have been around, we can still see the differences in us. And if you let those differences continue over millions and millions of years, let's say Eskimos or the people that lived in the completely cold, they got isolated from the people in the warm for millions of years. Over those millions of years, the people from the cold and the warm places would probably end up looking very different and being very different. They might not even be able to breed anymore, because they've adapted their bodies the best way to use the least energy in those environments.
Okay. Let's take something more at the granular level, like a liver. Would you agree that a liver has a function in the body?
Yeah. Wait, what does the liver do? Is that what
it processes toxins?
Right. Yeah. Okay.
It also produces some other things.
And the kidney confused.
Yeah. No worries. Me too. So if that is a function, from the evolutionary view, the organism that the liver's inside of, according to evolution, once didn't have a liver, right?
Yeah. Well, you can look back at and see vestigial organs, like pre-organs starting to exist. Because the kidney, the liver's got a very specific function of filtering out toxins, but there might have been a less efficient version of that wasn't as organized in a previous version of our species, Homo erectus or whatever. But as we've needed to start to filter out more toxins, the ones that are able to do that better with more developed livers are the ones that then survived better. So the liver became more of a specific organ rather than just kind of a bundle of cells.
Okay, so you're saying there was a proto-liver that was a liver 101 that still processed and did something with toxins, right?
Yeah, like you can look at fish that live really deep down, right? In the Mariana Trench and stuff. They've still got, it's not eyes, but they've got what we could see, what would develop into eyes. They've got cells that are sensitive to photons and stuff, right? It's not eyes like we would recognize in any way, but we can see how what they've got would have, if they had the environmental pressure of having more light, of developed into something that was better at absorbing that light. We can see the similarities. We see, that does the same thing as our eye, but it's more basic.
I understand. I'm just because the reason I ask is when I ask, is there a time where the organism that has a liver was something else and didn't have a liver, and you said, yeah, there was a previous thing, but it had a type of liver. It was just a simple version, which I would just start the question over and say, let's take that simple version. Was there a time where the organism didn't have the simple version of the liver that did its
probably, yeah.
simple? So under the evolutionary view, wouldn't it be reasonable to ask what's the mechanism under evolution that where an organism that doesn't have anything even close to a liver develops a functioning thing with a purpose inside the body?
Okay, so let's say there's a bundle of cells just happily existing, but this bundle of cells is very reactive to a particular chemical, right? It gets in contact with this chemical and it destroys the cells in some way, right? But this bundle of cells is multiplying, and during that multiplication, one of the bundle of cells has a slight mutation in it, where that mutation means that it's more resistant to that chemical that destroyed the cells previously, right? So now that cell exists in the environment with something that can hurt it, but it's more likely to survive than the other ones because of that slight mutation that has allowed it to deal with that toxin in a certain way. Now, let's say over millions of years, there's more of that toxin evolving, but the bundle of cells is also evolving, but the environmental pressure is that toxin's there. So their environmental pressure has forced them to that mutation then become a cohesive way of dealing with that toxin. That evolution in a nutshell is accidental, right? It's an accidental mutation that is the beneficial thing that becomes the adaptation to the...
I think I understand.
Right.
I understand. So it sounds like you're saying the process of evolution is accidental, you're saying accidental processes can produce very strict, defined purpose.
Yeah, 100%. If that accidental mutation actually turns out to be beneficial, right, then that mutation is more likely to be passed on to the next generation because it's beneficial, because it helps.
Under evolution, what evaluates whether something's beneficial or not in the process?
If it helps you survive in an environmental pressure, like I mentioned with this bundle of
That's
cells.
an evaluation. No, I don't know if you get the question. We're post evaluating, and from the human view, we're saying, it's beneficial. The organism in its simple form doesn't evaluate whether something's beneficial.
Yeah, right, okay, I understand. No, the organism itself doesn't know. But the fact that it's had this mutation that has given it a better chance of survival means that organism and its offspring are the ones that are more likely to survive that particular environmental pressure. Okay. And if they are the ones that have that particular mutation, it's going to be passed on in their genes, and then because that's the thing that's passed on, it becomes more prominent as part of that particular generational path.
It sounds like what you're saying is when you look at the human body or any other body, you go in and there are these particular mechanisms, just like an engine. You look in and there's that part, and then they're all connected, similar to an engine. You get all these pipes and veins and things. What you're saying is that everything in the body, right, in the human body, let's take veins and arteries and muscle and all these things, developed accidentally, but are consolidated in a very purposeful manner with a purpose inside the body, but they're totally crafted accidentally. But not only individually crafted accidentally, but the connections between them and their logical relations are also accidental, right?
Yeah, that's why we have so many junk DNA is the word for it. If you break down our DNA, there's literally a bunch of stuff that does nothing. It's just there. It's useless to us. But if we look at what it could have been useful in the past when there was different environmental pressures, you understand why it's there. But it's not something that we need to use anymore. The mutations will change, which bits of the DNA are being useful, add things.
Useful as purpose, though. How can you have accidental usefulness?
Because it helps you. It's as simple as that, right? If hypothetically, the Earth all of a sudden raised 10 degrees, right? But then you had a child, Jimbob, and that child, for some reason, had a genetic mutation that allowed them to survive in warmer conditions than most humans would, right? Now, a lot of the humans are going to die off because the planet's got too hot for them. But your child has much more of a chance of survival because it's now got this random genetic mutation that has allowed it to survive in warmer temperatures. So that child finds a partner, propagates, that gene has passed on to their offspring, which it's a complete accident, but now their offspring is more likely to survive this environmental pressure. And because they're the ones that are likely to survive, the other ones are going to die out, and that gene will become the dominant one.
Okay. Well, it just seems that even the term accident, is there a way you can tell me a definition of accident, being that you're using it in biology, that doesn't presuppose some type of direction? Because to me, an accident, there's no way to define an accident if it's not some sort of missing of a target. So what is an accident?
Okay, so this goes deep into biology, I guess. When cells split, in the womb or whatever, and they're making themselves, sometimes there might not be a complete bit of DNA made. There might be a slight problem. Might have maybe the person that's carrying the child had a slight nutritional defect, which didn't allow this particular part of this child to develop properly. Or maybe that it was literally just, DNA is code. And
Craig, but a defect,
copied, it can have glitches and errors in it,
yeah.
And that error can show up as a mutation.
But the thing is, Craig, even the term error or defect assumes that there's a non-defect, which is the target. So when we point to things, right? That's what. Okay, but that's what I'm asking is like, what's an error if there's not a target? And if evolution is accidental, there is no target to say something's an error.
Right. Okay, so again, it's just arbitrary labels that we're given stuff, right? So you and I, we have a definition of what a human is and what normal human DNA is, right? So for us, that's kind of the target, right? But that's just an arbitrary label that we've given, right? So say your and our DNA is the target, but we have an offspring that has slightly different DNA to ours. I guess it's missed the target and under your terminology, and but it's still, the DNA is still basically the same as ours enough that it exists, but it might have an adaptation, a mutation that will help it survive in whatever environmental pressures happen.
Okay,
evolution
so survival.
Right? I will be 100% clear. Evolution is an accident.
So evolution, not only the mechanism is an accident and all the things that it produces accidentally, purposefully, that it produces purposefulness accidentally, function accidentally.
Yeah.
But not only is that true, but the fact that it gears towards survival and not death is also accidental.
Yeah, it is. In the same way that, like I explained, it's an accident that allows a species to continue surviving. There's species die out all of the time because they cannot adapt to their environmental pressures quick enough. If the environmental pressures change too quick, then the species doesn't have time to adapt. Those mutations aren't appearing, or those mutations just don't happen. then
Okay.
that species is going to die out. The ones that do have those random mutations, the complete accidental random mutations that
Okay.
just so happen to be beneficial, are the
Okay.
ones that survive.
So under the evolutionary view, all the things that are based upon our biology, chemistry, neurology, everything else in between, maybe that we don't even know, you're saying all of that and the effects of which are accidental.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I will 100%
So
say, Jimbob,
okay.
say evolution, you and I existing here are
Okay.
the result of a billion cosmic
Okay.
accidents.
Okay. Do you agree
Accidents?
that?
That's not a word, is it?
Okay. Well, do you agree that from that view that even our reasoning is downstream from this evolutionary process?
Yeah, the reason you and I can sit here having this conversation, having an intellectual discourse, it's an accident. It's a
Okay.
result of a billion accidents. Our
Okay.
consciousness existing the way that it does because
Okay.
of the neurons and stuff. It's
Okay.
all accidental.
Okay.
But
Okay.
you know
So
what?
if
That is amazing. I just
well-
want to say I find that incredible, right? That makes me
Mm-hmm.
feel more special than the thought of like a God creating me or something. The fact that I
Okay.
exist because of a billion accidents. That makes me feel
So
amazing.
so does it make you feel amazing to know the entailment of that view is that your own rationality and reasoning is accidental?
Yeah, the fact that I'm able to rationally think things is incredible, right? And I am constantly in awe of the fact that the universe has somehow accidentally come along and ended up with me existing. I find that incredible. I find that awe-inspiring. I find
Okay.
that a testament of the infinite time
Okay.
that the universe has existed.
Okay, so according to you, we're accidentally debating, and all of your reasoning and rationality is accidental, but you're arguing for something, a teleological position that we're heading towards truth or defending truth in a debate.
Teleological, could you just define that word for me?
Like purposeful, like there's a higher purpose to what we're doing here, like
Right,
like some
I see
sort
what you
of
mean. Okay.
super goal or whatever. If we're debating and you hold a view that we're accidentally debating and all of your reasoning and my reasoning is accidental, how would you even know we're going toward truth if there's no towardness? That would assume purpose, but you can't have purpose if everything's accidental.
I disagree. There's nothing to say.
But that was an accident that you disagreed.
Yeah, but I've still got my purpose. I because of a billion accidents, I can decide my own purpose and my own path. Right?
Accidentally.
Accidentally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that I'm able to think, you know what, I'm going to take my family to Tenerife in 42 days. I'm so excited, by the way. Oh, I can't wait. That was an accident that happened in the cosmic grand scale of things. There was no preset path that was a thing that was going to happen. The fact that I exist to be able to make that decision to take my family away, it's all accidental, but it doesn't change the fact that it's led to me existing able to make that decision.
Okay. So when people study evolution, all those scientists, the people you're appealing to in their studies and their investigation, they're actually demonstrating just an accident. Their activity is accidental. So how would we, if that was true, how would you know that the evolutionary theory and its assumptions are true if they're just the result of accidental firings in people's brains?
That's why we have things like the scientific method, to allow us
that
to
we
test
accidentally do.
Yeah,
but
I tell you what,
do it accidentally though.
We accidentally came up with the scientific method, but
so when
it's accidentally developed a method that allows us to determine at least what we are able to falsify.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So when scientists do the scientific method, they're actually accidentally doing it.
Jimbob, everything's an accident. Every decision that's ever made is an accident. You cannot tell what's going to happen in the future. The fact that you and I exist alone is just an amazing, fantastic accident. You can ask it as many times as you want.
Okay.
Our thoughts, our feelings, our homes, our families, they're all the result of a cosmic accident. Every single thing. But that doesn't change the fact that it exists. We can study it, we can test it, we can think about it. And here's the thing. Here's the most amazing thing. Am I 100% sure that everything about evolution is true? No, absolutely not. And that's the amazing thing about science, right? We might come across something in the future that changes what we know about evolution and how it works. And that excites me, knowing that I don't know everything. But at the moment, this is the best explanation that we've got. We're unable to falsify our own hypothesis to a certain degree that makes us happy with it. So evolution at the moment is the best answer to why we exist as we do today.
Okay, well, so this is the problem I have. Can you define accident for me?
Oh, come on.
I can pick it up. I'm just like, guess. I'm not holding you to it. I'm just like generally. I actually don't even know, Craig, to be fair. Like, I don't even actually know what it would be defined as. I'm just gonna
something without a predestined path, I think.
Okay. Let me see. Something
I mean,
bad
I guess
that
I'm trying
happened.
to define it in context, right? Yeah,
I don't.
you can define accident in I accidentally trip and smash my nose, but at the same way, the mutation happens accidentally.
Yeah.
I think we all know what accident means. It's just
it's actually interesting to figure out what it means, though, because it has so many different uses, like car accident, this and this and this. But the reason I ask, Craig, is like, for any context that I think of the word accident where it's ever used, it's the thing it's pointing to is a misdirection or a missing the mark of something that was intended. And so, being that you hold a view that evolution is accidental, I'm not sure how you're going to actually define accident with having its own positive ontology in a sense, without appealing to the thing that it's missing from. So it's like undesirable or unfortunate happening.
No, I wouldn't say undesirable.
Sure.
If anything,
that's fine.
Right. Okay. Let's go with Sorry, someone actually said it in my chat. It was very good. An unintentional consequence.
No intent.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So if it's an unintentional consequence, if evolution is an unintentional consequence, then the thing that's causing evolution, some mechanism, is also an unintended consequence of something before it. And if all of evolution, from your view, is actually unintentional, to me, without exactly telling us how this accidental process produces very purposeful things, like, for instance, like I think about like snake venom, like it accidentally produced venom, a very specific type of protein that literally melts the insides of like rats so they can consume it easier, right? But that was an accident. But we don't have any B12 injection rattlesnakes. When you're going on a hike and oh shit, I got bit by a snake, and someone goes, don't worry, those are it's a B12 snake. It just as well could have developed, right? A B12
right. Well,
snake.
We look at the snake. Why does it have venom? Because there is a mutation that gave it something that could protect itself, and that mutation was beneficial. Well, no, it was accidental. That mutation wasn't purposeful. It wasn't planned. The mutation,
is there a purpose in defending yourself?
It to do that was unintentional, and the fact that it can now defend itself is an unintended consequence. It's a beneficial consequence. Yeah.
Why does it defend itself?
Because it wants to live.
No, but that's purpose.
Well, but the ability to defend itself in that way was unintended. It didn't, the species didn't intend to develop that particular mutation. That mutation was just beneficial and allowed it to survive because it's now better at defending itself.
Yeah, but
it didn't
beneficial.
Plan that. It didn't think that. Beneficial doesn't mean intended.
Beneficial does mean seeking an outcome which assumes intent.
Well, no, it doesn't. Beneficial can be something can be accidentally beneficial.
Yeah, but to say it's beneficial means there's an outcome that you're like seeking.
No, it doesn't.
Even if it's an accident.
No, it doesn't. An accident means you're not seeking the outcome. Jimbob, you can have something that is unintentionally beneficial that you didn't plan to happen.
No, I'm sorry, Craig. You're you're misunderstanding me. It's my fault. When the accident happens, when you say something's beneficial, you're actually making a claim towards something, right? So we're doing it post-diction. We're saying animals in the past, a rattlesnake was once a different snake that didn't have this special protein, and it developed it accidentally. And it also developed fangs that was able to accidentally distribute the accidental venom, right?
Over time, yes.
And because it accidentally developed a very purposeful thing, it just accidentally used it to its advantage. By the way, the advantage doesn't actually exist. It's also an accident that there's something called an advantage. And it basically put them in a place where they're going to survive, even though there's millions of other snakes that don't have venom and they survive just fine from their accidental. All
the snakes that have, that exist now exist because they adapted to the particular environmental pressures. Rattlesnakes, they developed that rattle accidentally, and turns out when they shake it, it scares other things. That's an extremely beneficial adaptation that happened by accident that allows rattlesnakes to survive more than other snakes.
Why do they accidentally keep the thing that accidentally has them survive?
Because that's the beneficial gene. Right?
No, you can't have both of those.
No, we can. Right. So
no,
we can. Listen. So the rattlesnake, right? That it has a mutation. Its offspring has a mutation where it doesn't have that rattle. Okay. Let's say it has two offspring, right? One's got a mutation that doesn't give it that rattle. One's got it has the rattle like normal. Okay. Now those two snakes go out into the wild. The one that is more likely to survive environmental pressures of predators and stuff is the one that has the rattle, right? Even though there is a random adaptation that took the rattle away, that's probably less likely to survive the environmental pressures. So the reason it stays is because that gene being there is beneficial for that species to continue being there.
Well, no, those are contradictory because because if your first step in evolution says the things that we see seem to be beneficial, that is to say it produces outcomes of their survival, was all of those features were produced accidentally. And I ask you, well, isn't it the case that under this fully accidental view that them keeping them there is also accidental? And you say no.
Well, no, I didn't say no. It is accidental. It depends on the environmental pressures. The mutation that would change whether that snake had a rattle or not, right? That mutation would need to be something that is able to survive in the environment, right? If it isn't able to survive in the environment, then it's not beneficial.
Okay, Craig, here's the thing.
Beneficial does not mean intent. It is an accidental benefit that allows that thing to keep surviving. And the offspring that also have that particular gene and that particular adaptation are more likely to survive. But if the conditions change, say the prey that goes after rattlesnakes, right, dies out for some reason, right, then it's less likely that the rattlesnake's rattle will then continue to be, because there's no reason for that to then be a beneficial thing, because the rattle is to scare off the prey and stuff. But if their prey's gone, then there's no reason why that would exist over a mutation that stopped it existing.
I'll give you a chance to respond, Jimbob, but just really quick, I want to mention, folks, we only have several more minutes, maybe around 5, 10 at most, before we jump into the Q&A. So if you happen to have a question, well, other housekeeping things, if you happen to have a question, you can tag me with @ModernDayDebate. Or you can do a super chat, which will push your question to the top of the list, or you can do the GoFundMe. So if you put in a donation and then let me know it was you, the person who put in the donation just now as we're live with this debate, we will read your question from the live chat if you tag me. And Basil Problem, thanks for your super chat, as well as we have a poll in the live chat on who you found most persuasive in today's debate, in case you didn't see that there. And we'll kick it back over to Jimbob until the Q&A.
Yeah. So when you look at things like testing an organism's response to stimuli by introducing something. The fact that you can repeat such a thing and you get a result demonstrates that it can't be accidental because it's repeatable. And so it's strange to come to a debate about natural science.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm saying that if something's testable and you come to the conclusion that introducing Y to an organism produces some sort of response that's regular, that you can come to sort of inductive conclusions about, it couldn't be random or accidental because the outcomes couldn't possibly be the same. And if you extrapolate that problem outward to evolution, the assumption that animals develop from other animals over time, and then not only that, but their features like fangs or wings or these things which have functions like a liver accidentally develop, then you actually can't, under the evolutionary view, say mechanism X causes this phenomenon, because that would assume causality, and causality couldn't be accidental causality. You can't repeat causality. You can't argue causality is a thing. X causes Y. If you think everything is accidental, including evolution, then anything you point to in evolution or in science to say that X causes Y, you're saying that's accidentally being consistent. It's accidentally consistent.
Yeah, but we can test that. We can, even if it's an accident, it doesn't stop it being a thing, right? It doesn't stop it existing just because it accidentally happens. And that's the evolution. Yeah, it's accidentally happened, but that doesn't stop it existing. It doesn't stop it still being accidentally beneficial for the species to continue existing. That is the point of evolution. It is random mutations that are beneficial under environmental pressures. It's
okay,
as simple
Craig.
As that.
Craig, would you agree a mutation? Would you accept the definition of mutation is a random copy or error in the what you called code?
Could be, yes.
Okay. Would you agree that for the most part, mutations, as we define them, they don't add or subtract anything to the organism?
Say
that they're redundant. They're redundant. They don't magically produce some sort of new path that's going to create a feature that's advantageous. Most mutations, as we define them, are nearly 99% copies of existing info. It doesn't add or subtract anything to the genome or do anything special. It's just it
can add things.
That's what's in. Yeah. Okay, but that's in question. Do you agree that for the most part they don't add anything or they don't subtract anything? They're neutral.
Mutations you don't subtract from DNA. That's why we've got junk DNA.
I understand.
It's stuff that's left over that we don't need anymore.
I understand.
Because but you add mutations can literally add things to the DNA.
Okay, so is it true that for the most part, I didn't ask what you think that it might do, if it's something might or could do something, right? I'm asking typically what we see is that nearly 99% of mutations are copies of existing. They're either erroneous or just duplicates of existing information in the genome.
Yeah.
Okay.
With
so if it's
changes, yeah.
Okay. So if it's 99% the case that what you called mutations are just copies of existing information, it doesn't add anything new. So when you appeal to, well, there are these moments where a mutation happens and it actually results in something beneficial. Can you name something that's a mutation and you know that the beneficial thing was a result of the mutation itself?
You mean you want me to tell you some form of evolution that's happened?
I want you to point to a mutation, which is a production of some information, whether it's a copy or not. Can you give me an instance where a mutation resulted in something beneficial, some apparatus or feature?
So the London Underground mosquitoes, there was a mutation that allowed it to absorb a certain protein, which meant that it could feed on insects and creatures that existed in the London Underground. Without that mutation that allowed them to absorb that particular protein, they wouldn't have existed in the underground. The mosquitoes would have all died out because they wouldn't have had anything to feed on like mosquitoes above the ground do. So for those mosquitoes, that random mutation that allowed them to absorb that particular protein was extremely beneficial. It was a complete accident, but for that mosquito, for that species of mosquito to continue, its generations going on, that was an extremely beneficial mutation.
Okay, I have to clarify something. It sounded like you said there's a type of mosquito that's able to absorb a type of protein. Is that what you said?
Yeah, the London Underground mosquito
is able to.
Once these mosquitoes got trapped underground, one of the mosquito's offsprings had a mutation. That mutation.
How did you know that?
Because they've studied all the remains and everything of the London Underground. I can send you the studies on London Underground mosquito. I don't have to go through the entire thing.
Wait, hold on a second. Craig, just sorry to interrupt, but it's a clarification. Do you agree that an adaptation in real time for an organism or an animal isn't identical to a mutation?
Well, the adaptation is a result of the mutation.
I know, but can adaptations occur in real time that aren't the result of a mutation?
No, you only have an adaptation because of a mutation over generations.
Okay, but if you see an animal do something new in real time,
that's not evolution. That's just an animal learning to do something. Evolution is generations displaying different traits.
And how did you know it was a specific mutation that allowed the mosquito to learn this new thing called absorbing a particular protein?
It didn't learn it. It just happened. There was a mutation in one of the mosquito's offsprings that allowed that mosquito to absorb a particular protein, right? Before that, mosquitoes could not feed on the creatures. They couldn't absorb red blood, right? That's what the mutation specifically was. It was a protein that allowed them to absorb red blood cells from creatures and stuff, right? I don't know how that happened. I can send you all the papers on the London Underground mosquito. But that random mutation in one of the mosquito's offsprings allowed that to happen. So that mosquito then fed on creatures, and then it itself had offspring which had that beneficial mutation. The ones that didn't have that mutation were less likely to be able to receive nutrients and all died. So only the offspring that had this mutation were able to continue living in the London Underground, and the mutation, they continue to mutate and have different things happen to them. And there were so many mutations and adaptations that they lost a lot of the abilities of the mosquitoes that exist above ground, so much so that they are very different species and can no longer interbreed.
Okay. Would you call what you just referred to, if I read this, would you agree that what you're describing with the mosquitoes is a change in an organism caused by a modification of a gene expression?
Yeah, there was a random mutation that changed the DNA, that changed the genes. But change was beneficial in the long run.
Sorry, do you agree there's a difference between a modification to gene expression and an alteration of the code itself? Is there a difference between a change, an alteration to expression, gene expression, and an alteration to the genetic code itself? That there's two different things.
I don't know.
Oh, okay. That's why I would ask is, like, in that instance, I would want to know, is that an example of gene expression changed by modification or the alteration of the genetic code itself? The reason I ask is if evolution is assuming the latter needs to be the thing as the mechanism, then the former wouldn't really be an example of it.
Saying whatever the mutation is, if that mutation leaves a beneficial trait, that trait is more likely to have generations that can survive the environmental pressures. That's it, right? And within the mosquitoes, the mutation, whatever it was, it gave them an adaptation that allowed it to survive on things that they wouldn't normally need to have. But that was the only source of nutrients. So the mosquitoes that didn't have that adaptation died out. And that is evolution in progress. It's showing that this random mutation was beneficial to the environmental pressures it was in, and that is what survived. All the other mosquitoes died out. It was only the ones with this mutation that managed to survive, and over decades became a very different species.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if you call it a different species because it has a different type of DNA thing going on, and it no longer can reproduce with its previous predecessor, that still doesn't get you to this view that one one thing you call a species over time becomes another entirely different universal thing, like a completely
But
universal
again,
thing.
then we can go back to comparing fossil records to fossil records to fossil records, and just going back in time and comparing similarities. And it goes back to the beginning of the conversation we had with the 9 things that I listed that are all ways of testing the hypothesis.
But Craig, you know how many animals you're assuming are a part of the evolutionary process? All animals, right?
Every single animal, everything, every
and
organism that exists is a result of evolution.
I understand. It's a clarifying question. So, and one of your go-tos is fossils, right? You would agree that fossils are pointing to vertebrates?
Yeah, fossils are one of the bits of evidence for evolution.
Okay.
They're not the be-all and end-all.
I understand,
right?
but it's one
of the things.
Okay, but you understand that most animals aren't vertebrates, right?
Yeah.
So there is no skeletal fossil for most of animals or invertebrates. So the standard you use, the criteria for transitional fossils being often a go-to, not just from you, but many evolution proponents and defenders, the fossil being pointing to mostly skeletal things and drawing out some similarities and then making some sort of conclusion about the matter. You couldn't really do that with the majority of animals, which don't actually have bones.
Yeah, but you just look at the adaptations and mutations that have happened over time and compare them. This is why we will test the hypothesis in whatever way we can. But like I said, Jimbob, right? This is just the best answer we have at the moment. This is just the best explanation. There's no alternative that gives a better explanation for what's happening than the current explanation and scientific theory of evolution, right? But again, that's the wonderful thing about science. We could discover something which changes everything we know that we think we understand. And
what could be discovered?
We're willing to change.
Okay.
What could we discover? I don't know.
I was finishing a statement. Sorry to interrupt. It's like, what could be discovered about fossils that would then move the claim that all fossils are transitional out of the equation? What could be discovered about fossils?
No idea.
That would move it so that you couldn't just call everything transitional?
Absolutely no idea.
Okay. Well, that's fair enough. Because to me, going in and saying everything's transitional and starting with that assumption and then looking at similarities and being like, look, they're similar. It must have come from the other thing that looks similar. My question would be, well, let's say all of the similarities were still there. How would you determine that they didn't come from each other?
I'll give you a chance to respond, Craig, and then we'll actually jump into the Q&A.
Again, you just look at the records that we have. We just look, right, okay, so these are similar to this. This shows a lot of things that we think are similar. We can test the DNA. We can look at the morphology. We can look at previous records and previous records. We just keep going back. But the most important thing will always be just testing the hypothesis in whatever way we can. All right? And again, science is never 100% certain about anything. But this is just the best explanation that we have right now. I don't know what could come along to change that. Something could, because who knows? But I don't know what that is. But right now, this is the best explanation we have. It makes sense. It's logically sound. There's experiments that fail to falsify all our hypotheses about evolution. And if something comes along that changes that, I am the person that is willing to follow the evidence.
You got it.
Accidentally, though.
Yeah, always accidentally.
Okay.
So many accidents. And I want to say, folks, thank you guys. I want to give a quick update. As you can see at the bottom right of your screen, a couple of quick housekeeping things. As mentioned, Uncensored America is putting on this tremendous debate, Andrew Wilson versus Apostate Prophet. It is going to be amazing. It's April 28th. Tickets are linked below. Get your tickets now before it's too late. Don't risk forgetting. You have got to be there. I will be there in person. Andrew will be there in person. Apostate Prophet will be there in person. Sean Simanku, who started Uncensored America, will be there. Come hang out, meet people, have fun, make friends. Tickets are linked in the description box, and there's a free option. So if you're like, hey, I don't know, like that's actually an option. So that's really cool. And we, as I had mentioned earlier in the stream, are raising funds for camera lenses for that debate. So we are trying to get these camera lenses, because back in DebateCon 4, people were like, James, like modern day debate, like you guys been around for a while and you got this brand name, and your audio and video quality sucks ass. And I was like, oh, really? Because I didn't, I don't know what the difference is. And they were like, yeah, you have to get better cameras and better audio. And it's true. Looking back, I'm like, wow, that was kind of shitty. But we are no longer running with shitty audio and video, as we basically, Sean from Uncensored America has been my camera guy. So for DebateCon 5, if you notice, like, wow, their video and audio doesn't look shitty anymore. That's because of Sean. And he said, hey, these lenses that we are renting for DebateCon 5, we should buy them. We will share them between our organizations. So when we host debates, or like Sean just hosted their event with like Myron Gaines, is all these events, we will share those camera lenses. And it definitely makes more sense because we're going to use them all the time. It just makes sense to buy them rather than rent them. Otherwise, you rent them so much that you paid more than what you would have for buying them. We've raised, in the last hour, we jumped up from about $500 to about $600. So we're at 600 even. So thank you for those of you who have supported. That GoFundMe is linked at the top of the description box, and it is linked at the top of the live chat right now. If you'd like to help, we do appreciate that support. And thank you to those 19 donors who've already jumped in on that, as well as what I'm going to do here is jump into the Q&A. I want to say a couple of quick housekeeping things. Folks, we appreciate our guests. If you want to hear more from our guests, what are you waiting for? Check out their links below. Made by Jimbob and Craig are linked in the description box. The guests are the lifeblood of the channel, so we do appreciate them and highly encourage you, even if you disagree with them, hey, go to their channel and harass them a little bit. Give them a little action that way and a little engagement, throw your poop at them. And want to say, though, first, thanks for your question. This one coming in from, and let me just make sure I got this sorted, is the first one. Rachel Wilson, thanks very much, says, Craig is very good at telling stories, but he hasn't explained how adaptation produces a complete and total change of kinds.
Yeah, I very much did. Over many years, the changes could be significant. It's we see evolution happening on a smaller scale, where there is very big changes in a subspecies, and over time, when we look at the the fossil records and everything, we can see how they can change from one entire species to another, one entire kind to another. The evidence of evolution is there, and I've explained the mechanism behind how it could happen very well.
I have a question. Not that it matters now, but in the future, it's a good feature when Craig's talking, he becomes big on the screen. Was there a feature I was supposed to unlock so that when I was talking, I became big on the screen?
Does that happen?
Come again? Oh, the way I have it is you guys remain the same size, and occasionally I'll adjust it if you move far away from your camera or closer to your camera. Otherwise, you guys are static in terms of your video size.
Oh, because I see Craig, when he talks, he becomes big on the main thing.
You mean on your Zoom, Jimbob?
Yeah. Oh, that's because it's mine.
Yeah,
okay, it's not the...
Yeah, you probably got a set in where talking appears on the screen.
Thank you.
If you just click it to view gallery, it will just stay static for you as well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
No worries.
And this one coming in from, do appreciate it. Lewis says, I feel your frustration, Eric. I must have missed that one for the last question. This one from Rachel Wilson. Oh, Alex Stein. Thanks very much for your chat. Said, let's go. And Alex Stein will actually be on in the next debate. So in an hour, we'll start the final debate of the night. Alex Stein versus First Amender. That is going to be high energy.
How many hours you been going for, James?
Huh?
How many hours you been going for?
Let's see. Since 8 a.m. my time. So what is that, like 8 hours? Oh yeah, it is. That's weird. I feel good. I actually feel surprisingly, yeah.
Now you got to get on my level. I did a 55-hour stream last time. Come on.
Wow. I'm thinking about maybe like an 18-hour stream next time. How do
24.
You like?
Come on, man it up.
Rachel Wilson also said, "This is bullshit. Craig doesn't know the difference between giving a lesson of nothing, but descriptions and making an argument. This isn't a debate. I probably put a comma in the wrong place. Craig doesn't know the difference between giving a lesson of nothing but descriptions and making an argument. This isn't a debate.
Well, Rachel, you may have missed the evidence and descriptions of the mechanism of evolution I gave. Actually, very much backing up my claims. Just because you didn't understand them, Rachel, doesn't mean that I didn't do my job. And unfortunately, this does just turn into me educating people that don't understand these basic physics. However, very much looking forward to debating you.
Wow, I really.
We lost your audio, Jimbob.
Oh yeah, how's it going?
You got it. This one from the Diesel says the evolution denier doesn't know enough about the topic to know he's looking to know what he's looking for as evidence.
Well, that statement said absolutely nothing.
Thank you for that. And Basil Problem says, Craig, why do you think you were qualified to participate in a debate on evolution?
Because I am a man of science. I've studied evolution quite a bit. I may not have degrees in biology or anything, but I've done lots of studies of evolution. I've done a lot of reading on evolution. I'm as qualified as anyone else really that wants to debate it.
Wow. Well, do also want to say, I know that I started the stream with crankiness, but I do want to give huge credit to Andrew Wilson, as he just told me, he's like, hey man, he's like, hey, let me do this for you. Something that he doesn't have to do, I have to acknowledge and say, hey, that's really cool. So I do appreciate that, Andrew. You're frankly, it's true, you didn't owe me. So I do appreciate that big time from Andrew Wilson. So I know that people are like, man, I expected to see Andrew when I woke up. It was going to be how I was going to start my day, drink some coffee, eat some eggs, and listen to an Andrew Wilson debate. And I know that some people were unhappy. And so it's true, I was unhappy. I explained the context, but I have to say, Andrew, thank you so much for your generosity and making, doing this. So
James, I just want to add in that your unhappiness was accidental.
Everything's
you
accidental.
got it.
Hey, James, it's good to see that you're no longer holding the mic and moving it around as well.
Oh, and someone asked they asked if I was using the mic to cover my face on purpose. Yes, because my monstrosity of a face, I'm trying to cover it up. Tiki Tack says, what a shit show. And Aulawali, see, can you have Jimbob explain radiocarbon dating?
Explain radiocarbon dating?
Yeah.
No, I can't in detail explain it. I can't, but Craig can if he wants.
I mean, I wouldn't know how to explain it in detail. It's basically looking at the age of atoms of carbon-14 and seeing how much they've how far the half-life has gone.
I'm wearing my hoodie. You know who says that? Mother Holda says, I'm pro-evolution. Craig needs to chill out. It was Jeb Bush who famously said
chill. I went to Amsterdam recently and I brought the Amsterdam back with me. I'm loving it. And like Jimbob knows, I was just reacting to him.
Wow. Dylan Dishner says, I would appreciate hearing Craig Steelman Jimbob's actual critique of evolution.
I didn't really have one. I was he was just asking questions about evolution. If anything, his critique would be that we haven't labeled things correctly, so that you can't say this is a species and this isn't. He also thinks there's some contradictions in how evolution would work, but there wasn't really a position that Jimbob gave specifically. It was more just denial of evolution as it stands.
You got
Jimbob,
it.
if I'm incorrect there, would you tell me?
Well, you almost got one of them. One critique was it couldn't make its way through fluidly, coherently through the method. You disagree with that. The other one was that nominalist thing where, like, if you say one thing is derivative or downstream from another thing, but yet evolution ultimately holds that there's no such thing as one thing or the other thing. There's no universality in any of these things, which you admitted everything is everything. And so if you hold the view that everything's actually one giant thing, then when you claim evolution is this process of things changing from one thing to another, but there's no such thing as one thing or another under evolution, it's a contradiction. I mean, that was a fair critique from my view. Ultimately, the philosophy of nominalism being used to try to buttress evolution, I find kind of hilarious.
You got it. This one coming in from, do appreciate it. Rachel Wilson strikes again, says, until the E. coli turns into something other than E. coli, Craig has no argument, just stories and descriptions.
We can call it something different, just like we do with everything else. Rachel, what you don't understand is they're just labels. All right? We can literally call it a different bacteria, a different species. And again, we can literally look at, the fossil records that we have and see how things used to be different. We can look at the geological time periods and what's happened in the world, compare that to when things existed. We know, there's not billions and billions of cat skeletons and fossils lying around. They look very different. So we can show that things changed how they look over time.
You got it. This one coming in from Jordan says, Jimothy is 2 for 2 back to back, made two opponents hide behind ambiguity and completely contort their own positions.
I'll take things that didn't happen for 500, please, Regis.
Wow. Basil Problem says, modern day debate, can you schedule a debate with the premise, quote, is there value in non-experts in a field debating whether that field is true or non-true?
Say that again.
They said, can you schedule a debate with the premise, is there value in non-experts in a field debating whether that field is true or untrue? So basically they're just saying, like, right, if you're two guys who aren't experts in whatever topic.
It's fallacious anyway. I mean, even if Craig and I didn't know shit, it might limit our ability to debate, but it doesn't take us out of the equation to be able to debate it.
We've still got opposing views, so there's no reason why we can't have an intellectual discourse, even if we don't hold academic qualifications in that particular field. There's no reason why Jimbob and I can't hold a discussion, a debate on our own terms. I mean, does it make a difference into the enjoyment? Yeah. You know what? It's probably going to sound better and more clickable if it says PhD in evolution versus, creationist. That's probably going to sound more clicky, right? But it doesn't change the fact that Jimbob and I can have a conversation and a debate.
You got it. This one from Aluwali Blue Vegan says, religion is a plague. Look what it's done to Bob's brain.
Well, actually, that would be an evolution advantage. In fact, I could make a good argument on a separate debate if Craig wants to have it, that if evolution was true and everything is derivative of the process, then our own belief in God, even if it was false, would provide some type of beneficial advantageous. So the fact that religious people actually multiply more than non-religious actually shows that the religious people, being that it's a plague, are more evolutionarily fit than you little scoundrel. Die out.
Well, to be fair, Jimbob, that is a slight straw man of evolution, because evolution isn't just more babies equals better.
No, I didn't reduce it to that. I just said a part of evolution would have to be that you survive, right? Because that would be what's called beneficial. And fitness, under an evolutionary view, is the ability to produce your offspring, right? Continue your lineage, your DNA, pass it on. That would be multiplication, right? So if religion is a plague and yet it produces more fit organisms, then the guy who just argued that it's a plague, well, bye-bye. Take yourself out of the gene pool.
But it also would produce less fit organisms as well.
Well, if you add what fitness means, I'm just saying fitness ultimately if the precondition for passing on genes is and survival is reproduction, if all other terms for fitness or unfitness are after that, I'm saying religion has the first and foremost covered better than the non-religious.
Well, yeah, because of the story that you've given it, right?
What story? That religious people produce statistically more. Their offspring is higher at a higher rate than non-religious.
The story that you've given that is a better thing. It's not necessarily true. It could actually having more of a species could end up with the species then dying out because resources become too scarce for the species. So necessarily having more and even healthier offspring isn't necessarily the evolutionary thing. Let's say, for instance, you had an offspring that was small, tiny, and weak. However, the environmental pressures existed where everyone needed a lot less nutrients because there was a lot less available. That smaller, weaker, less healthy organism is more likely to survive in an environmental pressure where there's less nutrients available.
Yeah, but the thing is, I think we agree. From my view, there's no such thing as better under evolution.
I mean, yeah, it's better for us is what we make better. What we decide is better, right? But
yeah,
and as in for the ability for the species to continue existing.
Yeah, and so it could, you actually, from the evolutionary view, being that the person said it's a plague, religion's a plague, it could be the view that an organism comes collectively to the conclusion that killing off a giant amount of species, genociding an entire race or even a category of species, they find that advantageous to them. Like they could potentially argue that under evolution. They might not know the outcome, but they can certainly make the claim, and it might be true.
Well, it certainly made the Viltrumites a lot stronger.
Yeah, I mean, it's like battle of the fittest, might wins, survival, takeover, terrestrial gain. I mean, religion, from an evolutionary view, let's say no religion's true. It seems like terrestrial gain by force, by will, by coercion, by any other means seems to be an advantage that would have developed over time from strict evolutionary terms, right?
Yeah.
First one coming in from... Look at Craig's face, so self-satisfied over there. I'm just teasing you.
Happy. I'm also happy.
I'm only, I'm firm with you because I know you could take it. Both you guys, you can handle it. This one coming in from, oh, by the way, folks, thanks so much. We also had someone just put in James Clark. Thank you for your support. We just jumped from 600 to 700 for the crowdfund. So thank you so much. That seriously helps a lot. I think we're up to about 20% of the way. We appreciate that more than you know. And yes,
and you guys watching on my channel, James gave me the opportunity to go to America, and it's happening again. And I really appreciate that. So if you guys have any spare meckles sitting around, and you want modern day debate to increase the quality of what they do, I would appreciate also if you could just chuck a few spare dollars at James's GoFundMe. Because then means you get to see me in high definition. Wait, is that a good thing?
That means a lot. And it is. We want to see your big, beautiful face in high def. And but yeah, we do appreciate it, folks, because it is true. Yeah, back in DebateCon 4, if you look at the old debate between Matt Dillahunty and Andrew Wilson, that famous or infamous debate where the shit hit the fan. And that one was interesting. You can tell that not only did the shit hit the fan in terms of the debate going sideways like 20 minutes into it where Matt walked out, but also the video and audio quality. People were like, James, come on, like you're going to take this seriously. You got to so we do think that there's a very good purpose for these lenses. We no longer want to rent them. We don't own lenses other than, I've got my cameras or something, but these are like good ones. And I've got to tell you, we appreciate your support. I'm pumped that we just jumped another $100. Seriously, it means more than you know. And also, we're excited that that $100 is the 700 is like not truly reflective as Andrew Wilson. I didn't share the details before, but basically Andrew Wilson said, "Hey, I actually he didn't have to do this, so it was very heroic for him to get up and do this." He said, "Hey, I just raised $500 for you, so." Want to give huge credit to Andrew. Like, that's super kind of him to help Modern Day Debate. Want to give a huge thank you. We've got a few more questions, but I do want to say Jimbob and Fight the Flat Earth, aka Craig, they help Modern Day Debate just by being here. Like, them as debaters, they're good debaters. People enjoy listening to them.
5 years,
We just
James.
appreciate the
5 years
debaters.
we've been doing this together.
Yeah, it has been a long ass time. And I also man, it's had its ups and downs. No,
It's
I'm
been
kidding.
fun.
It's been great. But both Jim Bob and Craig are linked in the description. Folks, what are you waiting for? Click on their links. Even if you disagree, I mean, if you agree, obviously, go have fun, make friends. If you disagree, then now is a great chance to go throw your poop at them over at their channel. Give them some engagement. A dislike helps just as much as a like. This next question coming in from Raw Dog says, why haven't we seen any monkeys evolve into humans over the many years of observation? If evolution is still a thing, we would still be able to see it happening today. Did it just stop?
No, it's still going on, but our lifespan is tiny. Monkeys never evolved into humans. That's not a thing. Monkeys and humans have a common ancestor. Monkeys evolved from the same thing that humans evolved from. We just developed in different environmental pressures, but we absolutely do still see evolution happening today. Let's look at, for instance, wolves becoming dogs. Yes, that is forced evolution, but still evolution.
Let's see. This one coming in from, oh yeah, we have a Modern Day Debate is on Facebook. In case you guys didn't know, that's linked in the description. And Christopher Howard says, Craig, are you aware that programmed cell death occurs 99.9% of the time when genetic mutations are discovered? This creates a statistical impossibility when considering the number of mutations necessary for new species.
Yeah, it does not create a statistical impossibility. It just creates a statistical unlikelihood. Unlikelihood doesn't mean impossible. Even if cell death does occur 99.9% of the time with mutations, that still leaves a 0.1% of the time where they don't die, and that mutation can exist and be then passed on to its offspring. All it needs is that 0.1% to have a beneficial adaptation for that particular organism in that particular environment, for that then to be the one that survives with the offspring.
So do you at least concede that evolution, the way it's described, is mathematically unlikely?
The odds of it happening the way that it does are mathematically unlikely. But as in, for the likelihood of the statistical likelihood of there being a genetic mutation that both doesn't cause cell death and is beneficial in the environmental pressures is, the odds of that are extremely low, but not zero. It is a non-zero probability, which means that it can happen. And because, Earth's been around for many billions of years, there's been plenty of time for that low probability to still happen.
You got it. And this one coming in from Mud says, this is to me Bob Ross evolution. Are the laws of logic and physics just happy little accidents as well? Just big mommy universe and daddy times baby?
Yeah, everything's an accident. The laws of physics that exist as they do, as far as we're aware, are an accident. The expansion of the universe allowed the gravitational constant and everything to be as it is by accident. Who knows? Everything is accidental. There's no evidence otherwise.
This one from 42 Attack says, Craig, today marks the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Lexington and Concord. Why haven't you Englishmen evolved? You're still kind of a pain. Love you, though. Happy Easter.
Shush over there, we'll take the colonies back.
This one from Jordan says, I think I got this one. Let me know. They said, just check the study. It was a change in mating behavior, had nothing to do with protein digestion. Full argument
Incorrect.
built on a lie.
The
Did we do that
molestus
one?
form of he's talking about the mosquito. The molestus form of Culex pippins exhibits several adaptations that enable it to thrive in subterranean environments that feed on mammals, including humans. Key adaptations include a host preference shift. Unlike its surface-dwelling counterpart, which primarily feeds on birds, molestus has developed a preference for mammalian hosts, adapting a protein that allowed it to digest red blood cells. Behavioral changes. The mosquitoes can also mate in confined spaces and remain active year-round without the need for a winter dispause. These adaptations are believed to have evolved in response to the unique environment of underground habitats where birds are scarce and mammals are the primary available hosts. So if he'd actually read the paper, he would see that there was more than one reason for the evolution. There was in fact multiple adaptations, including the ability to digest blood cells from mammals instead of just birds.
This one, I forgot to tell you. Where do we say? Right now we are at $700. If we get to $1,000 before the end of this debate, I will, I will take off my hoodie, show you the Subway tattoo. It's my favorite tattoo. It's my only tattoo.
My tattoo beats
Some,
yours.
why? But it's not Subway.
No, it's Star Trek.
Okay, well, nobody's perfect. But I will show off my tattoo if I don't know if show off is the right word. Embarrass myself with my logo on my back. If we get to $1,000, I appreciate it. So thank you so much. This one coming in from, do appreciate it. That is, I will admit, that's a very well done Star Trek
It's not finished
tattoo.
yet. I've got a bunch being added to it. Earth's going here. A lot of colors going in it. This is going to be bright gold. All the lights and stuff on the ship. The nacelles are going to be on because it's at warp. And a
Bob,
bunch
any
of nebula and
tattoos?
stuff.
Okay.
No tattoos? Any tattoos?
I have one very regrettable tattoo. I got a tattoo of my daughter's initials, which is M and J on my middle finger. And the M sort of dissolved, and now it looks like an H. So I have an HJ on my hand.
Oh no! Can you not get it like touched up?
No, you can't touch up the finger because it just bleeds. Because your fingers are always moving. So I just have to just deal with the funny accident that I have HJ on my arm.
I mean,
my
it's
hand.
a story. It's funny. I mean, you know what it means. That's the thing. You got it
Ah,
because it means something to you,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Plus, if someone
good and
says, "What's
noble.
that?" you get to tell a funny story.
That's true.
What more noble purpose could there be to get it, for your kids? Like,
Yeah.
Right.
that's cool.
I've
I
got
like
my,
that.
My family's on this side. I've got my my wife, my son, and my daughter on here, along with my family's clan tag.
That's rad. And this one coming in from Let's Talk God says, question for Craig, is sex an evolutionary accident? I don't know if they mean like relations type sex or if they mean
Well, right. Sex
sexes.
is how humans propagate, and that the way that they do that is a result of evolution, which is an accident. So, I mean, the short answer is yes. Sex is an accident. Is it an accident when I have sex with my wife? I hope not. I surely hope she's aware it's happening.
This one coming in from your question from No Way As Way 1988 says, why don't prey animals evolve to willingly be consumed?
Why don't prey animals evolve to willingly be consumed? Because that would be...
Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, there's no genetic mutation that would cause... Plus, that wouldn't be beneficial. Why would willingly being consumed be a beneficial adaptation?
Yeah, that's interesting. This one coming in from Tenublet says, Craig believes a pro-organism evolved a more complicated penile nub and somehow came across another proto-organism with a vaginal opening by mere chance, when then reproduction worked just fine. Bruh.
Wow. Please don't light any matches because you must be around a bunch of strawmen. No one said that. Species evolve, as a species, and the mating process is part of that adaptation. Good Lord, man. You're like the literal person that thinks that a fish had sex with a monkey and turned into a bird or something.
You got it. And I can't believe it's already like 4:26. I'm in Pacific time, so crazy. This time has flown by. Austin Graham says, James, do you say wow like Owen Wilson on purpose, or did you accidentally evolve that way? Ha ha
Wow.
ha. That's funny. This
You
one
you do
from
realize you do that, right?
it wasn't because of Owen Wilson, it's because there's a guy named Fred Herbert that I heard say it like that.
Wow.
Um
I literally
Basil
see his face when you say it. I'm like, stop it.
Basil Problem says, are you a crazy Christian? So modern day debate is a neutral platform, but yes, you could consider me crazy and a Christian. Crazy Christian
So you're
with
not just
a
a Christian,
hyphen.
you are specifically a crazy Christian.
Pretty kooky. I've got some beliefs and ideas that are like both from yeah, I'm like, anything goes. Slithery says, look into the anthropic principle. If the laws of physics weren't what we observe, then we wouldn't be here to ask the question.
Yeah, I mean, he's right. If the laws of physics were different, then who knows?
I think this might, that maybe this has to do with like the idea of like, why do the laws of physics seem to be such that they allow for like they're perfectly they appear to be designed for life. And I think he's saying, well, yeah, like the anthropic principle says that if the laws of physics weren't what we observe, then we wouldn't be here to even ask the question. In other
Yeah.
words, like if they weren't apparently designed for humans. The only thing is, I want to give you pushback on this, Craig, unless Jim, Bob, if you have something, is that like, this is a little bit the anthropic principle. I don't want to. How about this? What would you say to this, Craig, if someone else sent a super chat that said, but isn't that kind of like saying, like, let's say I said, like, listen, I survived a plane crash. The stars just seem to align in terms of like all the things that had to be in place to protect me during the plane crash. Like everybody else died. And it was from like, it's a plane crash. So the plane's coming
Yeah.
down from like, I don't know, 30,000 feet. And then, you know, you asked me, James, how could this have happened? Like, why did it appear as if there was design? And imagine my answer was, well, if I would not have survived, like if it wasn't the case that all those things happened in just the right way, I wouldn't be here to tell the story.
Or even
Don't you think
ask the
that'd be a
question.
little, huh?
Or even there to ask the question of how it
Right.
happened.
But don't you see how it's kind of like not particularly an answer of like, it doesn't feel like it's answering the question per se. Because if I, like the question is like, well, wow, like how did you survive? Like me saying like, well, if I didn't, I wouldn't be here to talk to you right now. It's like, well, but that doesn't explain how you survived, right? Like that doesn't explain how all these things were like perfectly
Yeah.
aligned so you survived.
I mean, if you survive a plane crash, that's the outlier, right? Most people don't survive plane crashes. So you were in that plane crash where you survived, but that's not the normal case. The fact that you survived the plane crash and you're there then to be able to talk about it and stuff is an accident in itself.
We'll move on to the next one, unless I don't want to take your spot in talking
No,
to
no,
Craig,
I'm cool. If
Jim Bob.
honestly, I like it's an interesting conversation.
The only thing I would add to that is I heard Craig say before that the laws of physics came about from an accident, but that would assume there was a previous law of physics, a type of physics that could produce the process that produces the laws of physics by accident. And then that set of laws would need to be accidental and then
Yeah, no,
would need something before it and so on.
no, you're absolutely right. We don't know how things started, right? We can mathematically go back to the point of the Big Bang, but we don't know what caused the Big Bang to then set in motion the laws of physics as we know them, right? But we know that if certain conditions were very different during the Big Bang, then the laws of physics could be completely different now. The gravitational constant was different. If the universe expanded at a different rate, things could have been very different. But the fact that for for whatever reason, if the Big Bang did happen, the conditions that arrived allowed the laws of physics to exist as they do. We don't know why. Could it have been a design beforehand? There's no way to answer that. But as far as we can tell, it's just an accident from the way the expansion happened.
Juicy. We'll jump into the next one. And we do appreciate your question. This one coming in from Quick Lee says God's creation must have a blueprint or recipe, and perhaps that is evolution/science. Perhaps we ate on the same page. I think they meant perhaps we are on the same page.
I completely agree with that, right? I am an atheist, but I there's no way I could ever prove that God doesn't exist or that you didn't create the universe or whatever. It's just that's something that's completely outside of science. But who's to say that if there is a God, he didn't set in motion the laws that evolution follows? It's very clear from the evidence, at least it appears to be clear from the evidence, that evolution is what happens. But I'm in no position to say that wasn't then designed before the universe to be how it happened. Jimbob,
I would just add that the ambiguity of God ends up being the problem here. Like, you have to be really specific when you say, like, I believe in evolution and I believe in God, and you have to go, like, who? Like, a Christian approach. I've debated Redeem Zoomer on this matter, that from a Christian perspective, if you just grant us that Christ is risen, that Christ took on humanity, human nature, but human nature is always evolving. There is no universal nature that Christ took on, because the universal natures don't exist. And so from that view, a Christian couldn't say we are tasked at healing our nature if there's no such thing as a human nature, right? And it also follows that if evolution kept continuing and we maintained our Christian duties, in my perspective, participating in the sacraments, let's say divine liturgy could very well be composed and conducted by a bunch of beasts that look like platypuses, right? So if that's the case, that you just need some time for that to happen. Now, if someone says God is like the creator of all things, but there's no real task or ontology for our being, or who we are and what we are, and you hold a view that evolution melds everything together, as Craig has kind of pointed to today, that everything's everything, there really are no distinct categories of animals and beings, then the question of, like, well, what are we doing here if that God set into motion this giant machine, biological machine? How could you have moral positions from this God if we're all just one thing? That would mean that, like, everything we do is not only accidentally produced, but it's actually determined by strict physical laws. That is to say, if someone, the terrible shootings that occur, those are just determined outcomes of biology through the evolutionary view. So, like, who is this God, by the way? Who is the God? I ask further questions. That's why it's fun to do debates against other theists, actually more fun than debating an atheist.
Take that, Craig. Listen, this one coming in from, thanks so much. We just jumped another $100 in the fundraiser for these lenses.
Nice.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it more than you know. And I got to tell you, I'm guaranteeing it. It's a very financially clever strategy for us, just because, like I said, if we have to do, hold on, my sister, I'm so sorry. Can I call you? I didn't realize I clicked answer. I'll call you right back in like 4 hours. Is that okay?
I'll call you right back in 4 hours.
Oh, thank you. Love you too, and happy Easter too.
Hey, Jimbob, that blue bar you've got behind you, what one is that?
Oh, it's Floor. I'll actually send you the link, Craig.
Yeah, because I'm wanting some of that for in here. I like it.
I think it's a Nuvo. I'll send you the link.
Thank you, appreciate it.
It's not. Yeah, it was very affordable too.
But yeah, basically, my sister says Happy Easter. I love my sister. But yeah, I do want to say, yeah, we are excited. So thank you so much for the last person. Anonymous donated $100. In fact, we have 2 anonymous donors of $100. Thank you so much for that support. That means more than you know. We're at 23% of the way. So that is, like, we're pretty close to being able to get one lens in full. And like I said, the cool thing is you usually have to pay like over $100 just to rent the lens for a day, if I remember right. You could
Oof.
just buy it for 900. If you use it 9 days,
You've got your money back.
you've already paid for it. And that's not including Baycon 5. We had to pay for insurance because the company's like, hey, you're renting like $19,000 worth of, because not only did we rent the lenses, but the actual camera bodies. It was it was freaking expensive. So this is a smart strategy because I'm telling you, we're in this for the long run. I just bought the moderndaydebate.com domain for the next 10 years. Finally got it
Oof.
because one of those damn squatters had it and I waited him out and I waited for the day it expired and I snagged it. The other thing is, uh, we need $200 more. If we get $200 more, I will show you the subway tattoo. Believe me, you won't regret it in the sense that it will keep you awake for many nights. Christopher Howard says, second comment, I say that evolution is statistically impossible because the creature with the mutation would not survive long enough to find a mate with the same quote unquote accidental mutation with which it could reproduce. I
A
think this is maybe,
Yeah, a mutation
go ahead.
doesn't automatically mean it straight away couldn't reproduce with someone without the mutation. It's only over several generations of that happening that they become very different. A mutation, straight away, there's no reason. Lions and tigers can still mate and produce offspring, even though they're genetically quite different. It has to be genetically very, very different for mating to not be possible. Although I think once a lion and a tiger has a child, that child can't then produce any offspring.
Hmm. This one from 1776 says, this is God's terrarium. We're all just living in it.
Puny God.
Interesting. Thanks for your super chat. This one coming in from No Way As Way 1988 says, Craig, are the laws of logic accidentally consistent?
Yes, everything is an accident. The laws of logic exist because of the universe existing the way it does, and as far as I can tell, that's an accident.
This one
How would
from
you hold on? How would you know it's not an accident? Because being that we established that your own reasoning is accidental, how would you know it's not an accident? If you said everything's an accident, how would you
Right.
know it's not? Do you think?
Right. That goes back to the question of, do I know what started the universe? Right. If if I knew there was a being that started the universe, that set every law of logic, law of physics, law of
Mm.
everything in motion, then I guess it wouldn't be accidental. But unless that is the only way that I would assume that things are not accidental, is if I saw the thing that designed it all. But as I don't personally believe in a god, then I have to hold the intellectually
Yeah,
honest position of that it's an accident.
yeah, but you do believe in something that's in categorically at least in the same category as God. You believe truth exists, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I would not say that truth and God are the same though, because God has, at least within your own paradigm, God has shown that He can lie.
Well, no, I'm saying that for something to be true, if truth exists, then there's an absolute standard ontologically for truth. But under your view, if everything's accidental, the truth as it exists ontologically, how does the truth exist if it's accidental?
Well, it can be accidentally true. Being true and being accidental aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah, but how? In what way does truth exist from your view, being that it's accidental? In what way does it exist?
Uh, you can show that A leads to B with logic and maths. I can prove mathematically that 1+1 = 2 and show that that's absolutely 100% true.
Accidentally.
Yeah, accidentally.
Okay.
You got it. This one coming in from, do appreciate it. Basil Problem says, Craig, are you comfortable with being a performer on a Christian channel that, based on a menu of debate topics, likely believes women's rights should be limited?
Modern Day Debate is a neutral debate platform on science, politics, and religion. Although James himself is a Christian and the majority of the audience appear to be Christian, the platform itself is not a Christian platform. I the specific things that James believes or that the audience believe does not change the fact that this is and always has been a neutral platform.
This guy's weird. This is the one that asked you, Craig, if you think it's if you do you, why do you think you're qualified to participate in a debate on evolution, Craig? They might be a stiffly stifferson. I don't know.
Stiffly, stiffly.
Maybe they're one of those.
You could ask
rigid
that. You
types.
should ask that guy. Why does he think he's qualified? To ask Craig if why he thinks he's qualified, and we should just keep going.
Yeah.
You know, just go down the
Infinite
line.
regress. This fun from Let's Talk God says, question for Craig. If sex is an accident, therefore, if I cheat on my wife, in all possible cases, it's an accident, correct?
Yeah, everything's an accident, but you have the ability to choose. Everything's an accident in the sense of you exist because of an accident. But because of these accidents, you have been given the ability to choose what you do. That ability itself is an accident. So what you choose to do is up to you. If you choose to use those accidents that have given you a conscience and a mind and your own thoughts, if you choose to use that to cheat on your wife, that's a you problem. I've been married for 18 years. I've never accidentally put my penis in somebody else.
That's good news. And this is also good news. Thanks for your question. This coming in from, let me just see if I can get this to load here. Oh, other good news. We jumped from 800 to 900. So thank you so much, folks. Seriously, we're excited about these lenses. We plan on using them all the time. I want to give you a quick, I'll wait until, oh, holy smokes. I actually got to let you guys, we have to wrap up pretty quick here. So I actually have to let our guests go because we are going to start the last debate in just 18 minutes. So let me just skim for any last questions. Then I want to let these guys go and I'll give you updates about stuff. But yeah, if we hit 1,000, I promise I will show you the subway tattoo. Very excited about it.
Go, guys.
And so yes, I don't know why you'd want to see it, but but we appreciate your support. I think that is it for questions. I'm going to do a quick skim and want to say check out Craig's and Made by Jimbob's links in the description box. What are you waiting for, folks? Right now, check them out. But yeah, thank you, Craig, and Made by Jimbob for being here. It's been a true pleasure to host you guys.
Absolute pleasure as always. Jimbob, thank you for the very passionate and enthusiastic debate. It's always fun.
You as well. You as well.
Thanks, guys. I will let you go. And what I'm going to do, in this case, it's kind of different where it's just booting you from the old Zoom call.
See you
I'm
later.
going to keep the same one. Take care. Have a good one. And
the host removed food from this meeting before he finished it. Oh, guys, that was fun actually. I think I'm going to be debating evolution a lot more because it's way simpler to debate than people think. Really, the evidence is just very, very simple. People make it far too complicated. Start going into speciation and kinds and this and that. It's all irrelevant, right? Be more basic with it. The fact is, every organism adapts to environmental pressures. Call it what you want. Give whatever labels you want to it. It does not matter. We see it happening. Thank you everyone for the support as always. Astro Electronics Lab for $2 Australian says Rimjob sure talks a lot, shame it's bollocks. The Diesel 499 biological evolution is change of alpha frequency with a population over generations. This guy is wrongly arguing speciation macro micro nonsense. Yeah, I know. That's the point. Thank you, Rachbot. I appreciate it. Clive Wells, your thoughts on how I did there? I'd appreciate your feedback as always. PhD Tony, if you're there also. And tomorrow I will be having round 3 with Mr. Trumptastic. And the focus of this one is me showing globe evidence and see what he says about it. Astro Electronics Lab, $2 says Knob uses gish gallop, doesn't know what it means. Yeah. Craig, give me an answer. You're gish galloping. Aaron for 4 months has been a member and says, I can see this debate is going to put my phone at great risk of evolving into an airborne object. Vic from Canada, thank you, $6.99. Jimbob's losing his mind and Craig's reaping all the benefits. We've got Astro Electronics Lab for $2 Australian says E equals MC squared, Jimbob equals knob squared. Don Carnage 42 has been a member for 8 months. It says, Jimbob, when does a cat become a mosquito? Borg Emporia asks, what happened to Commander Shelby? We don't know. Commander Shelby was on the shuttle that the secret organization appeared and did stuff with. It's 120 years later. It's unlikely he's still alive, but his legacy is yet to be told. If you guys are wondering what I'm talking about, find me every Friday on Top Hats Off channel, where I'm a fucking nerd. Doctor, our president, is a G-rapper and convict who's been a member for 56 months, says, 56 months, and still no idiot has disproved science. Trump's trying, don't worry. Vic from Canada for $13.99 says, it doesn't even matter how logical factual you try to be with Dim Knob. He's only capable of mm-hing and uh-hing his way through your answer, then validating his own word salad with petulant anger. Sounds about right. Aaron for $2.99 says, show us something being created from nothing, Jim. Good answer to their nonsense. Aaron for $2.99 Australian says, semantics and philosophy are not arguments. Well, have you tried arguing against Christians? Because that's what they have. Mr. Svensson with 56 says, well done for holding it together, Craig. Mind-blowing. Every word he says is a facepalm trigger. Free one for $2 says he has no idea what beneficial means. I fucking know it. Jack Fetter, $4.99. There were millions of other mutations that were not beneficial and didn't endure. You think the mutations were planned. The others simply failed. Yeah, that's what accidental means. Fucking, they don't get it. Aaron for $2.99. Oh, wait. Design Song 1 for $10. Thank you very much, my friend. This is dumb. Jimbo wants to imagine divine purpose in rattlesnakes with venom. Would he not claim a rattlesnake without venom has divine purpose? It explains nothing. Aaron for $2.99 Australian. Nailinaise evolved to digest nylon. Pardon me. Excuse me. Yeah, there's many bacteria and stuff that have actually evolved to digest plastic at this point. We've got dihydrogen monoxide for £2 says, how the fuck did Jimbob get through high school? Aaron for $2.99 Australian says, H2O, he was homeschooled. By someone not very nice. Yeah, Grudge, cause and effect. But it is accident. Everything's an accident. The Turtle Moose for £2 says, happy accidental zombie Jesus Day. Yes, happy chocolate zombie Jesus Day, everybody. Vic from Canada, $13.99 says, voted for you at Modern Day Debate, but dude, I don't think any of your degrees or education or any of that petty shit will hold a candle to what the Google undergrads had to say. I'd be hecka eck-faced if I were you. Gary IOW for £5 says, FTFE, you should visit Berlin. Maybe it's possibly on the list. Janos Takos, who's been a member for 35 months, says, evolution is driven by mutation that is inherited, not mutation in differentiated cells. Gametes don't do apostates. That makes the probability better. Yeah, good point. Otto for £2 says, $2 rather, weird that spring is associated with rebirth. Odd. Not really. Treason shit. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it very much. Your support is incredible. Like tomorrow, I'll be back with a new debate. I have a lot of new stuff coming up. I'm making everything again from scratch. I've lost everything. That's why there's no intros or stuff at the moment. But I haven't heard it yet, and I'd like to. So on the way out, we are going to play Conspiracy Music Studios' new video, The Catzoid's Delusional Reality. Please go and subscribe to Conspiracy Music Studios, or I will send Daniel Pratt to your home. Thank you everyone for watching. I love every single one of you. Remember, stupidity's not a right. Fight the flat earth.
Spinning lies with a crooked smile. accusations. My vile behavior got me canceled in style. Ooh, outraged in the comments, called the globe a psyop trick. Pointed fingers, spewed some slander, till the backlash came in quick. So I rebranded, ducked the heat. Now I posture like a saint, reading scripture line by line, just to butcher it every time. I don't like pronouns, so I'm a 3D printer now. Beep beep, stacking up delusions, layer by layer, pure deceit. I'm crafting my own reality, like a delusional man, printing out my madness with that trademark flatsoid jam. Listen, I'm not flatsoid anymore, I've transcended. I've upgraded to creality. I create my own reality, because facts are for sheep. Now I preach on holy verses, like a scholar with no clue. I've lost most of my viewers, mangling scripture on repeat. Globe is a cult, I still cry while butchering ancient scrolls. Still dodging every question like I dodge YouTube trolls. I don't like pros.